Okay, Torah portion this week is called Tzav, and it means command. Now, command is a verb. It's something that you do. You command someone, or you are commanded. We get from this verb the word mitzvah. Mitzvah in Hebrew means commandment. Commandment is a noun. It's the name of something. Okay, it's not something that you do. It's the name of something which implies the action, which is the verb tzav. That's why it's mitzvah. Okay, that will be important for something that we'll get to in a little bit, the relationship between a noun, something that's named after an action. Okay, now in this Torah portion, we're going to have 4 parts, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Instead of having 2 or 3 parts of like maybe 80 to 100 slides, I'm going to do 4 parts of averagely probably about 45 slides. Okay, so we'll have short parts, and each of the parts is going to be about something in particular. First part, we're going to have a look at, Charlie went through last week the offerings that were brought. Well, they were the commandments for the actual offerings, what people are to bring. This is the commandment for what the priests are to do with the offerings, the procedure that they follow, and we'll see a little bit of an insight into the life of a priest, what would have happened in his day. In the first part, we're also going to look at a concept that we're really not very familiar with. Okay, we're going to look at the concept of being washed with blood. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But in Scripture, it both says that Yahovah washes his garments in blood, and it also says that we make our robes white in the blood of the Lamb, in the blood of Yeshua. So we need to really understand what it is to wash your robes. I'm also going to link the sin offering, which Yeshua was, with the Passover sacrifice, which Yeshua was as well. In the second part, I'm going to look at the whole idea of when does the day start. Okay, there's all of this stuff going around at the moment of the day starts at the dawning of the day in the Bible. So I'm going to look at all of the verses. We've looked at this before from the Scriptures that say when the day starts. I'm going to look at all of the verses that confuse people, because there's a lot of confused people about this. And they've got all these verses which sound, to be fair to them, like in the English it's saying that the day starts in the morning. So we're going to have an examination of that. We're also going to look at, people have kind of got this idea, we're never going to have unity in our doctrine until the Messiah comes. It's never going to happen. We're just waiting for the Messiah to come, and then everyone will be unified in their doctrine. But it's actually not what Scripture says. Scripture tells us that right here and now, us as a group, we should be unified in our doctrine, and it tells us how we're to go about that. In the third part, I'm going to look at, where it says that if the blood of bulls and goats was for the cleansing of the flesh, the blood of Yeshua is for the cleansing of the conscience. Okay? I'm going to look at the concept of what it is for your flesh to be defiled. Because we think, okay, so those sacrifices were for the cleansing of the flesh. We haven't got a temple now, but that's fine. I don't feel like my flesh needs cleansing of anything. So we're going to have a look at what Scripture says about that. And then in the fourth part, I'm going to talk about something that I've actually been asked about 7 or 8 times in the past couple of weeks to talk about by various people online, and that is tithing. What is tithing? Are there 3 different tithes? Are we to give some to the poor, 3.3% to the poor, and 10% save up for the festival, 10% that we give to the Levites? How exactly does it work? So I'm going to break all of that down and explain all of that. And we start in Leviticus 6:8. It says, "And Yahovah spoke to Moshe, saying, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the Torah of the burnt offering. This is the burnt offering, because it is burned on the altar all night until morning, and the fire of the altar is kept burning on it. And the priest shall put on his linen garment, and put his linen trousers on his body, and shall take up the ashes of the burnt offering, which the fire is consumed on the altar, and shall put them beside the altar. So he puts on his holy garments, his linen garments, and he takes the ashes of the burnt offering off. After it's been burning all night, he comes along and he takes it off the altar. And he shall take off his garments and put on other garments." So he's just put on his holy garments. He's taken up the ashes, puts them beside the altar. Then he's to take off his garments, put on other garments, and shall bring the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. Because anything that touched the altar, Torah tells us, becomes holy. It becomes set apart. So if he's going to take these off the altar, he's not going to just wander out into the camp among all of the people in that state. He puts on other garments, and then he takes the actual ashes themselves and takes them outside the camp. And the fire on the altar is kept burning on it. It is not put out. Okay, the fire was never ever put out. Even when they would pack up the tabernacle and they would move around the wilderness with it, the fire on the altar was never put out, because as we'll see next week, Yahovah lights the fire supernaturally himself. So the fire is never to be put out. And the priest shall burn wood on it every morning and arrange the burnt offering on it, and shall burn on it the fat of the peace offerings. Fire is continually kept burning on the altar. It is not put out. And this is the Torah of the grain offerings. That was the burnt offering. That's how the priest is supposed to do the burnt offering. Okay? This is the Torah of the grain offering. The sons of Aharon shall bring it near before Yahovah in front of the altar, and shall take from it with his hand, from the fine flour of the grain offering, and from the oil and all the frankincense. So this was what the grain offering was. It was the flour, the oil, and the frankincense. And the priest was to take from it a portion with his hand, okay, when it was brought, which is on the grain offering, and shall burn it on the altar for a sweet fragrance as its remembrance portion to Yahovah. So the grain offering would be brought. He would take some of it on his hand, and he would put it on the altar, and it would be burnt as Yahovah's remembrance portion. Then Aharon and his sons eat the rest of it. Okay, so some of it's taken, that's for Yahovah. Aharon and his sons will eat the rest of it. It is eaten with unleavened bread in the set-apart place. They eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. These things, very particular things, is done with all of these things, as you'll see. You know, taking off the garments, taking it outside the camp. This is to be eaten in the courtyard. So they bring it, he'd take some of it, he'd burn that, and then the rest of it was to be eaten by Aaron and his sons. Now they were the priests. The Levites are not the priests, okay? Well, better to say, the priests are all Levites, but all the Levites are not priests, okay? Only those who descended from Aaron were the priests. They're the only people that were allowed to be priests. So when you see Aaron and his sons, it's talking about priests. It is not baked with leaven. I have given it to them as their portion of my offerings made by fire. It is most set apart, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. Okay, we'll see the sin offering and the guilt offering. Well, in this, we're going to see as well how the things that were brought to Yahovah were apportioned. Because they were brought to Yahovah, but obviously he is Elohim. Okay, he's not of this earth. So when we bring material things to him, what's he going to do with them? When we bring material things to him, he tells us what to do, what he wants done with them. And he's telling us here, okay, give this particular thing to the priests. All the males among the children of Aaron eat it. Now, that's not saying that, you know, the women were priests as well. This is a command. Often it will say all the males in the congregation, or sometimes it will say all the males in the congregation. This is saying all of the males, and they've got to be among the children of Aaron. Okay? The priests, basically. A law forever in your generations concerning the offerings made by fire to Yahovah. All that touches them is to be set apart, is to be made holy. And Yahovah spoke to Moshe, saying, this is the offering of Aharon and his sons, which they bring near to Yahovah. Okay, Charlie looked at the word karav last week, meaning to draw near, which is what all of the offerings were to do. We think of sacrifices and offerings as, you know, what the pagans would do, and they would sacrifice bloody offerings to their gods, and they just wanted their gods to stay away from them. The offerings that these people were bringing were different in nature. They were to draw near to Yahovah. They were bringing something that was valuable to them, that they depended on for life, and they were offering it to Yahovah, basically in faith, to improve the relationship between them and Yahovah. You bring something that's important to you, and you say, you are my provider. You're going to provide everything for me. I'll give you this. Even though I need this, I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to provide to me. Okay? So this is the offering of the priests when they draw near to Yahovah, because they brought offerings as well. Beginning on the day when he is anointed, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour is a daily grain offering, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. It is made on a griddle with oil. Bring it in mixed. Bring the baked portions of the grain offering near, a sweet fragrance to Yehovah. So Karav, draw near with the baked portions of the grain offerings. And the anointed priest from among his sons who is in the place prepares it, a law forever to Yehovah. All of it has to be burned. Okay, when Aharon and his sons are bringing offerings, they're not then going to eat the offerings as well. They'll bring an offering and give it to themselves and go, oh, thank you, I'll eat this. Their offerings are to be burned. Every grain offering for the priest is completely burned. It is not eaten. And Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to Aharon and his sons, saying, this is the Torah of the sin offering. Okay, so we've seen grain offering, the burnt offering. This is the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is sacrificed, the sin offering is sacrificed before Yehovah. It is most set apart, and this would entail an animal. Okay, the peace offerings, the burnt offerings, the sin offerings, the guilt offerings were all animals. Obviously, the grain offering was grain. The priest who is making atonement eats it. In the set apart place it is eaten, in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. So the priest who makes atonement, him particularly, not all of the sons of Aaron, he is the one who eats it. All that touches its flesh is to be set apart, and when blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it was sprinkled in a set apart place. Now this verse is heavy with meaning, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. Leviticus 6:27. All that touches its flesh is to be set apart. Bear in mind this is the sin offering. Yeshua fulfilled all of the offerings, but in particular we're told in the New Testament that he was a sin offering for us. All that touches its flesh is to be set apart, and when its blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it is sprinkled in a set apart place. So how do we see Yeshua in this? Well, one place that we see him is in Isaiah 63, 1-4. It says, who is this coming from Edom, with garments of glowing colors from Botzrah, and is robed in splendor, striding forward in the greatness of his strength? It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Okay? Who is it that speaks in righteousness, that's mighty to save? It's Yeshua. This is talking about Yehovah. So this is Yehovah coming as Yeshua, as we'll see. Why is there red on your raiment, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. And I trod them down in my pleasure, and I trampled them in my wrath. Their blood is sprinkled on my garments. What did it say? When the blood is sprinkled on the garments, they shall be washed. Their blood is sprinkled on my garments, and I have stained all my raiment. For a day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. Okay? When blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it was sprinkled. This is in the context of the sin offering, but we'll get there. Revelation 19:11-15 said, and I saw the heaven opened, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called trustworthy and true, and in righteousness he judges and fights. Very similar description. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns having a name that had been written, which no one had perceived except himself. And he was arrayed in a robe covered in blood. Now in some translations it says dipped in blood, but really the word means covered. And his name is called the Word of Yehovah. Okay, so this is Yeshua. He was arrayed in a robe covered in blood, just like Yehovah when he says that he comes from Edom. I'm not going to get into the timeline of when he comes from Edom and everything else. The thing that I'm going to concentrate in this is that he was arrayed in a robe covered in blood, just like Yehovah, when they said, why are your raiments red? And he talks about, because I've trodden the winepress. And the armies in heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. This is the word of God coming out of his mouth, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, according to Ephesians 6. That he should smite the nations, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai. Okay, so this is Yeshua. Psalm 58 talks about this. It talks about the judgment of the wicked, which is what we're seeing in this scenario in Isaiah 63 and in Revelation 19. It says, would you indeed speak righteousness in silence? Do you judge straightly, you sons of men? No, in your heart you work on righteousness. Hold on to that piece of information because it's going to be important in a bit. Okay, in your heart you work on righteousness. In the heart unrighteousness is done, and in the heart righteousness is done. On earth you weigh out the violence of your hands. The wrong have been estranged from the womb. These who speak lies go astray from birth. Their poison is like the poison of a snake, like a deaf cobra that stops its ear so as not to hear the voice of charmers, a skilled caster of spells. O Elohim, break their teeth in their mouth. Break out the fangs of the young lions, O Yehovah. Let them melt, let them vanish as water. Let him aim his arrows that they be cut down. Like a snail which melts away as it moves. Okay, bad translation, but not the point. Like a woman's stillbirth, let them not see the sun. Before your pots feel the thorns, whether green or ablaze, he sweeps them away. The righteous rejoices when he has seen the vengeance. He washes his feet in the blood of the wrong. Okay, so we've got this washing in blood here. What did he say? He treads the winepress. This tells us that when he's doing that, he's washing his feet in the blood of the wrong. It's the same context. In this, he's judging the wicked in this, which happens when Yeshua comes. He washes his feet in the blood of the wrong. And man says, truly the righteous are rewarded. Truly there is an Elohim judging in the earth. In Genesis 49, 9-11, we see a reference to this as well. It says, Yehudah is the lion's cub. From the prey you have gone up, my son. He bowed down, he crouched like a lion. And like a lion, who does rouse him? So this is Jacob blessing his sons. This is his blessing that he says over Judah. The scepter shall not turn aside from Yehudah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. This is a reference to the Messiah. Until the Messiah comes. And to him is the obedience of peoples. Okay, because Shiloh, Messiah, came from Judah. He's known as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Okay? To him is the obedience of the peoples. And it says something very odd, or it seems odd out of the context of the other scriptures. Binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. This is when he's treading the winepress. So the robes that he's wearing are stained in blood. But this tells us that thereby he actually washes them. He washes them in blood. Hebrews 9:22 says, and according to the Torah, almost all is cleansed with blood. Okay, again, it's just a bit of a strange concept to us, isn't it? Okay, so reading the verse again, all that touches its flesh is to be set apart, and when its blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it's sprinkled in a set apart place. It is, therefore, Yehovah's garments, it says in Isaiah 63 that they're being sprinkled with blood. And we're told elsewhere that when this happens, they're actually washed in this blood as well. 2 Corinthians 5:20-21 says, therefore we are ambassadors on behalf of Messiah, as though Elohim were pleading through us. We beg on behalf of Messiah, be restored to favor with Elohim. For he made him who knew no sin to be a sin offering for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of Elohim. So Yeshua was the sin offering. Often it says in some translations, him who knew no sin to be sin for us, which doesn't make any sense. The word there is actually sin offering. Just when people come to the New Testament, they don't tend to read it in the context of the Old Testament. They tend to make it mean something else. So in Revelation 1:5-6, it says, and from Yeshua Messiah, the trustworthy witness, the firstborn from the dead and the prince of the kings of the earth, to him who loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. So we've got the concept of being washed in blood there as well. And has made us kings and priests to his Elohim and Father. To him be esteem and rule forever and ever. Amen. Revelation 7:13-14 says, and one of the elders responded, saying to me, who are these dressed in white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, Master, you know. And he said to me, these are those coming out of the great tribulation, having washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Okay, so we've got this washing of robes that's happening here. Yeshua washes his robes, and he washes them in the blood of the people, of the nations, Our robes are washed in his blood. It's quite strange, isn't it? His robes are washed in the blood of the sinners at the end. The sinners' robes are washed in the blood of Yeshua at the same time. Zechariah 3, 1-10 says, and he showed me Yehoshua the high priest. Okay, Joshua the high priest, obvious picture of Yeshua, but this is a guy that was on the earth. It's not Yeshua himself, it's a guy on the earth, and we'll see why in a second. Standing before the angel of Yehovah. So we've got Joshua the high priest, the angel of Yehovah, and Hasatan, Satan, standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. Okay, Hasatan is just the Hebrew for the adversary. That's what Satan means. Okay. So three people, Joshua the high priest, the angel of Yehovah, and Satan in this scenario. And Yehovah said to Satan, okay, so we'll see that the angel of Yehovah, when the angel of Yehovah speaks, it is Yehovah himself. It's him manifesting, okay? So Yehovah said to Satan, Yehovah rebuke you, Satan. Yehovah, who has chosen Yerushalayim, rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? And Yehoshua was dressed in filthy rags. Okay, so this is all a picture. And was standing before the angel. And he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, remove the filthy garments from him. And to him he said, see, I have removed your guilt from you and put on costly robes on you. So, what was removed from Joshua the high priest, the filthy garments that he was wearing, was his guilt. Okay, that's important. It's his guilt that's removed. And I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. Then they put a clean turban on his head, and they put garments on him. And the angel of Yehovah stood by. And the angel of Yehovah witnessed to Yehoshua, saying, thus said Yehovah Sabaoth, if you walk in my ways, and if you cherish my duty, then you shall also rule my house, and also guard my courts, and I shall give you access among these standing here. Now often throughout the Tanakh, we'll get like these little summaries of all of the law. And if you do these things, then you can rule in my house, you'll guard my courts, okay? There's another summary given, very similar to something that Charlie read from Psalm 24 last week. And Psalm 15, 1-5 says, Yehovah, who does sojourn in your tent, in your tabernacle? Okay, we know that us as the body of Messiah are the tabernacle. Who does sojourn in your tent? Who does dwell in your set-apart mountain? He who walks blamelessly and does righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. Okay, he who is blameless before Yehovah. He is not slandered with his tongue. He has not done evil to his neighbor, nor lifted up a reproach against his friend. In whose eyes a reprobate one is despised. Okay, interesting, isn't it? We've looked before at the idea that if someone is wicked, you're okay to be like, I don't like you. Okay? But he esteems those who fear Yehovah, he who swears to his own hurt and does not change. Okay? We've seen this as well recently. People who enter into covenant with Yehovah, but they don't swear to their own hurt. In other words, if something's going to disadvantage them, that's at the point at which they're quite happy to sin. They're quite happy to break the covenant. Okay? Him who swears to his own hurt and does not change. He has not put out silver at interest, and he's not taken a bribe against the innocent. He who does these is never moved. And that being never moved is a reference to when Yeshua does come back. Okay, it says that the things which can be moved or that can be shaken will be taken away. All those things which are not founded on the word of Elohim. So all of this is telling us to keep the Torah. It's the Torah that's important. Now listen, Yehoshua the high priest, you and your companions who sit before you, for they are men of symbol. What that's really getting across in the Hebrew is that this is a picture. What's being shown here is a picture. For look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch. So the important things from this passage, his filthy garments are going to be removed from him, and his filthy garments is his guilt. Costly garments are going to be put on him, and this is going to be achieved by this servant, the branch, who we know to be Yeshua, being brought forth. Okay? Yeshua being brought forth is going to remove the guilt, the filthy garments. Isaiah 61:10 says, I greatly rejoice in Yehovah. My soul exults in my Elohim, for he has put on garments of deliverance or salvation, same word, on me. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness, So the filthy garments, the guilt is taken away, and we are clothed in righteousness. All of our sins are forgiven when we are washed in the blood of Yeshua. What is incumbent on us then is to walk and not defile the garments. So Zechariah 3:4 says, I've removed your guilt from you and shall put costly robes on you. What is it? How do we see this in the New Testament writings of guilt being removed from us? Hebrews 9:14 says, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works? Okay, so this is us being washed in blood again. It's our conscience being made clean. The filthy garments are made clean. That's our guilt, our conscience, our guilty conscience being removed from us. And then costly garments, we are arrayed in a robe of righteousness. The conscience is in the heart, okay? Hebrews 10:22 says, let us draw near with the true heart in completeness of belief, having our heart sprinkled from an evil conscience. So the filthy garments were in our heart, okay? We're given robes of righteousness in our heart because righteousness is done in the heart. Romans 10:8-10 says, well, what does it say? The word is near you and in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of belief which we are proclaiming. That if you confess with your mouth the Master Yeshua and believe in your heart that Elohim has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness. This is where the robes of righteousness are put. The filthy garment is in our heart when we are guilty before Elohim. Yeshua washes us in his own blood, cleanses our conscience, our guilt, cleanses that, and then puts robes of righteousness on, which is done in the heart. All of that's important for understanding Leviticus 6:26. It says, all that touches its flesh is to be set apart. When its blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it is sprinkled in a set apart place. Okay, we'll look at that a bit more in a second. What I want to point out here is this word, its. In the Hebrew, the word its can also mean his. Okay, so if we change that, we change the rendering of how it's translated into English, all that touches his flesh is to be set apart. And when his blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it was sprinkled in a set apart place. Okay? Hebrews 10:19-22. So brothers, having boldness to enter into the set apart place, okay, sprinkled in a set apart place, having boldness to enter into the set apart place by the blood of Yeshua, by a new and living way which he instituted for us through the veil which is his flesh, all that touches his flesh is to be set apart. And having a high priest over the house of Elohim, let us draw near with a true heart in completeness of belief, having our hearts sprinkled, our hearts where the filthy garments were, from a wicked conscience. Any blood goes on the garment, then it must be washed. What does it say next? And our bodies washed with clean water in the set apart place. So this is what we can see. We can see Yeshua all through Leviticus 6:26. All that touches his flesh is to be set apart. When his blood is sprinkled on any garment, you wash that on which it is sprinkled in a set apart place. We've got the set apart place, the blood, his flesh, and our hearts being sprinkled from the wicked conscience, which we've seen is the filthy garment, our guilt being removed. Okay? Now verse 28 says something interesting about Yeshua as well. It says, but the earthen vessel in which it is cooked is to be broken, and if it is cooked in a bronze pot, then it is scoured and rinsed in water. Romans 9:21 says, basically, that our bodies are earthen vessels. They're described all the way through Scripture as vessels, that we are clay in the potter's hand, basically. So the earthen vessel in this, we are earthen vessels. Our bodies are earthen vessels. The earthen vessel in which it is cooked, okay, this word we see somewhere else, this word for cooked here. It's in Exodus 12:9. It says, do not eat it raw nor boiled with water. It's the same word in the Hebrew. If we look at it in Strong's, it can mean to boil, mean to cook. It can also mean to roast. Okay? And it's interesting to me that it says, do not eat it boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire. It's not the same word. It's a specific word which isolates the meaning of that word there. It is roasted in fire. So, but the earthen vessel in which it is cooked is to be broken. Okay, so the earthen vessel in which it is cooked, the earthen vessel of the sin offering, when we see it as a picture of Yeshua, is Yeshua's body. 1 Corinthians 11:23-24 says, "For I received from the Master that which I also delivered to you, that the Master Yeshua in the night in which he was delivered took up bread, and having given thanks, he broke it, saying, 'Take, eat, this is my body, my earthen vessel, which is broken for you.'" So the earthen vessel is to be broken. It's exactly what we see in Yeshua. Now, find this bit of this verse interesting. Charlie's going to go through next week the clean and the unclean food. And there's an instruction in clean and unclean where it says that if an unclean insect is to come into the food that's being cooked, then the earthen vessel has to be broken. Okay? And I've always thought in my head, well, if you've got to break an earthen vessel, what happens if something like that happens when you're cooking in a metal vessel? But we actually get the principle for what you're to do there. The earthen vessel is to be broken, if it is cooked in a bronze pot, then it is scoured and rinsed in water. So I think it's pretty safe to apply that to the other scenarios where the earthen vessel is to be broken. Every male among the priests eats it. It is most set apart. This is a sin offering. And no sin offering from which any blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the set apart place is eaten, is burnt with fire. This even more links the sin offering with the Passover offering. No sin offering from which the blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement. Yeshua is the sin offering. His blood is brought into the tent of meeting, okay, the tabernacle, us, and our hearts are sprinkled with this blood and washed clean. Our conscience are cleansed. So no sin offering from what that is for which that is done in the set apart place is eaten. Instead, it's burned with fire. Very interesting that in the Passover commandments, it says, "Do not leave it until morning." What remains of it? So if Yeshua is the sin offering and he is not to be eaten, all of him is going to remain until morning. You are to burn with fire. There's a lot of connections between the sin offering and the Passover offering in particular. I think that it's good for us to acknowledge them. We'll come to a close in a second as well. This is the Torah of the guilt offering. Okay, we've seen the sin offering, we've seen the grain offering, we've seen the burnt offering, okay? This is the Torah of the guilt offering. It is most set apart. The guilt offering is sacrificed in the place where they sacrifice the burnt offering, and its blood is sprinkled on the altar all around. Then he brings from it its fat, the fat tail and the fat that covers the entrails, and the two kidneys and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver, which he removes with the kidneys. Okay? And the priest shall burn them on the altar as an offering made by fire to Yehovah. It is a guilt offering. We're going to look at this idea of fat later, the idea of not eating fat and the idea of not eating blood and what it actually means in the scriptures. Every male among the priests eats it. It is eaten in the set apart place. It is most set apart. So the other things they're eaten in the courtyard of the tabernacle around the edge. This is to actually be eaten inside the holy place. Not in the Holy of Holies in the middle, but in the actual tabernacle itself. It is most set apart. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. There is one Torah for them both. The priest who makes atonement with it, it is his. Not all of the priests, it's the priest who makes atonement. And the priest who brings anyone's burnt offering, the skin of the burnt offering which is brought is the priest's, it is his. Every grain offering that is baked in the oven, and all that is prepared in the stewing pot or on a griddle is the priest who brings it, it is his. And every grain offering mixed with oil or dry is for all the sons of Aaron, for all alike. Okay, so we're seeing how this is divided up. This is the Torah of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which is brought to Yehovah. So this is the fifth offering now, the peace offering. If he brings it for a thanksgiving, then he shall bring with it the sacrifice of thanksgiving. Unleavened cakes mixed with oil, unleavened thin cakes anointed with oil, or cakes of finely blended flour mixed with oil. So Charlie looked at the different types of the thanksgiving offering that would be given to Yehovah. Okay, different types of the peace offering. One was the thanksgiving. So if it's a thanksgiving, you follow this procedure. Beside the cakes, he brings as his offering leavened bread together with the sacrifice of thanksgiving. So these are all unleavened. This is leavened. And from it, he shall bring one cake from each offering as a contribution to Yehovah, to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering is his. So the peace offering was one of the flock. To the priest that is offering the animal, he brings one of the cakes to the priest, and it belongs to the priest then. As for the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. Okay? Peace offering for thanksgiving, got to be eaten the same day. If the offering he brings is a vow or a voluntary offering, it is eaten the same day that he brings his sacrifice. What is left of it is to be eaten the next day. So if it's a vow or voluntary offering, it's eaten that day or the next day. But whatever is left of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day is burned with fire. However, if any of the flesh of the peace offering is eaten at all on the third day, it is not accepted. It is not reckoned to him who brings it. So Yehovah reckons the offerings the people bring to them. It's to their credit, if you like. This one, though, is not reckoned to them. It is unclean to him, and the soul who eats of it shall bear his crookedness or his iniquity. And the flesh that touches that which is unclean is not eaten. It is burned with fire, and as for all the clean flesh, all who eat of it are clean. So anyone who's clean can eat of this offering. But the soul who eats of the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yehovah, while he's unclean, that soul shall be cut off from his people. And when a soul who touches that which is unclean, of the uncleanness of man, or of the uncleanness of beast, or of any unclean swarming creature, and shall eat the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yehovah, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. So being unclean and eating this offering is a no-go. Okay, it's holy, it's set apart to Yehovah. And there we'll take a break, and we'll come back in the second part, and we'll look at night and day. Okay, we're going to go back to a verse that we kind of just passed over, because it brings us on to the subject of when does a day start. It says, as for the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. And if the offering he brings is a vow or a voluntary offering, it is eaten the same day that he brings his sacrifice. And what is left of it is eaten the next day. So people will look at this and they'll say, well, the next day is in the morning. Okay, you don't leave any of it until morning. And then it says, with this one, you can eat it the next day. So it's kind of saying the next day, and then it's linking it with the morning. And these verses, they're either an error in logic. When people are reading them, they make a logical error when they're reading what's said, and it doesn't actually say what people are saying that it says, or it's a translational error. And it's either one or the other, and we'll see some examples of those. Okay, so when the priests, they were serving in the tabernacle, yeah? The animals would be brought to be sacrificed during the daytime of the day. Okay, so the daytime of the day, if we're going off a day starting evening, you wake up in the morning, you have the daytime, and then the following evening begins the next day. Okay, so if this animal is offered during the daytime, and it says that you don't eat it the next day, you don't leave it until the morning, that's simply because by the time it rolls around to the evening, they're not doing sacrifices anymore. They're not eating the sacrifices anymore. So when they come back to work the next day in the morning, they don't eat any of it then. But it would never be the case that they would be eating of these things during the night. So the night isn't even a relevant consideration in this. It just says, look, eat of it the same day. Don't leave it till the morning. But that reference to the morning is simply because that's when they would be coming back into the tabernacle, not because that's when the next day starts. And it doesn't actually say that's when the next day starts. It just says that the morning is a part of the next day, which of course it is. Genesis 19:33 says, so they made their father drink wine that night. These are Lot's daughters, okay? They made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she arose. And it came to be on the next day, okay, that the firstborn said to the younger, see, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight as well. And you go in and lie with him so that we keep the seed of our father. So they wake up It's on the next day, sorry. It doesn't say they wake up. On the next day, they say, I slept with him last night. Let us make him drink wine again tonight as well. And you go in and lie with him. And this is all done on the next day. So what people will do is they'll look at this and they'll say, so this was the next day. This must be the daytime. Okay, they've woken up in the morning. This is the daytime. And they've said, last night this happened, so tonight we'll do this, because that's how we speak, isn't it? Well, if we look at the Hebrew, this is the King James translation. Okay, it says here, this night also, because we've got the night here, layil, okay, the lamed, yod, lamed here. And if we look at it actually in the Hebrew paragraph, it says gam, which means also, and then ha layila, okay? Layila is the modified version of layil, but it's got this before it, the hey, and the patak vowel, which makes a ha. And when you see ha before words, it means the or this, okay? It can mean both, like Ruach HaKodesh is the Holy Spirit, for example. Ha-Satan, which we saw before, the adversary. So it is ha-layil, gam ha-layil, also this night. So if we go back to the verse and read it like that, what it's saying is, it came to be on the next day. Okay, when would the next day start? If they went into their father that night, then you'd have, that would be one day. The daytime of the next day would still be the day as well. The next day would start at the evening. Okay, so it's saying on the next day, which from our reckoning starts in the evening, the firstborn said to the younger, see, I lay with my father last night. Okay, on the day before, the night of the day before. Let us make him drink wine this night. This is the night. This night as well. So it doesn't contradict it in any way, shape or form. It's just saying the next day. Because they expect you to have the context of when the day is. When it says the next day, you're just thinking, okay, so this is the evening following that night. You see, in the scriptures it says things like the 10th day started on the evening of the 9th and goes to the evening of the 10th. The evening is a transitionary period, okay? And the evening of the 9th, this is when it's beginning to get dark, and the 10th day starts then, and often it's called something like twilight in the scriptures, which is referring still to the evening, but the latter part of the evening. So from evening to evening, you have a day. From the latter part of the evening, that's when the day starts, to the early part of the evening, that's when it's going to come to an end, okay? So they expect you to have that context. So when they say, last night I lay with my father, we will lay with him tonight as well, or this night, it's because it's already the evening. No contradiction there whatsoever. Exodus 10, 3-13 says, and Moshe and Aharon came into Pharaoh and said to him, thus said Yehovah Elohim of the Hebrews, till when shall you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they serve me. Or else, if you refuse to let my people go, see, tomorrow I'm bringing locusts within your borders. And they shall cover the surface of the land, so that no one is able to see the land. And they shall eat the rest of what has escaped, which remains to you from the hail. And they shall eat every tree which grows up for you out of the field. And they shall fill your houses and the houses of all your servants and the houses of all the Mitzrites, the Egyptians, which neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were on the earth to this day. And he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to bring these locusts if you don't do this. And Pharaoh's servant said to him, to when would this one be a snare to us? Let the men go so that they serve Yehovah their Elohim. Do you not yet know that Mitzrayim is destroyed? And Moshe and Aharon were brought back to the Pharaoh, and he said to them, go serve Yehovah your Elohim. Who are the ones that are going? And Moshe said, we are going with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds we are going, for we have a festival to Yehovah. And he said to them, let Yehovah be with you, as I let you and your little ones go. Watch, for evil is before your face. So he says, no, not all of you are going, just you and your little ones are going. Not so, you men go now and serve Yehovah, for that is what you desired. And they were driven out from the presence of Pharaoh. So he says, yeah, okay, you can go, but actually it's not going to be the ones that you asked for, it's just going to be these ones. And Yehovah said to Moshe, stretch your hand out over the land of Mitzrayim, for the locusts to come on the land of Mitzrayim and eat every plant of the land, all that the hail is left. And Moshe stretched out his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yehovah brought an east wind on the land all that day and all the night. Morning came, and the east wind brought the locusts. Okay, so people will say, well, the day and the night are part of the previous day, and he said, tomorrow I'm going to bring the locusts. So when the morning comes, the locusts come. So that must be when tomorrow is. It's in the morning. Doesn't say that though. All it says, all that day and all the night. If we know that the next day starts in the evening, then it was all that day, and it was all the night as well, and then the locusts came in the morning. If I said to you, I'm going to do something on this particular day, and then it happened in the nighttime, you wouldn't say, oh, so a day starts in the night, definitely, because you said it was going to happen on this day, and then it happened in the night. That's an error of logic. This isn't what this scripture is saying at all. The time in the next day when the locusts came was in the morning. The day did start in the evening before, but the time that the locusts came were in the morning. Exodus 16, 22 to 27 says, and it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said to them, this is what Yehovah has said, tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath set apart to Yehovah. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook, and lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep it to the morning. So people will say, okay, so tomorrow's a Sabbath, and they were keeping this bread for the morning. So that means that the day starts in the morning. Doesn't mean that though, does it? That's not what this is saying. It's interesting that it says, okay, on this day, on the 6th day, bake everything that you need, cook everything that you need, lay over you for yourselves what is left until morning. What is this actually saying? It's saying you can't do any cooking past today, so you're not going to be able to take it and cook it in the night for the morning time. You can't do it any time past the evening, okay? But with that context there, you understand that. Without that context and reading into the scriptures this new doctrine which has come along, then you can think, oh, so that is what it's saying. See, there's a difference. When you're interpreting scripture, there's 2 types of what people call hermeneutics. It really just means how you interpret scripture. There's one called exegesis, and that's where you go to the scriptures and you say, what did the scriptures definitely say? What do the scriptures teach? Then I'm going to know that that's true. There's another form of interpretation called eisegesis, and that's where you go to the scriptures with an idea already in your head, and then you see it everywhere in the scriptures because it's an idea that came from you. It's not taught in the scriptures, it was taught to you, and then you read it into scriptures that seem to support it. Okay, and that's what people are doing with this whole thing of the day starting in the morning. It continues and said, and they laid it up till morning as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worm was in it. And Moshe said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to Yehovah. Today you do not find it in the field. Doesn't prevent the day having started the evening before though. Gather it 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. So all of the context of this is them gathering it. They weren't going to be gathering it in the nighttime. They gathered it during the daytime on the 6th day. The day would come to an end in the evening. The 7th day would start. The night would pass. And then on the 7th day, during the daylight, they would go out to gather, but they didn't find any. Exodus 18:13 says, and it came to be on the next day that Moshe sat to rightly rule the people, and the people stood before Moshe from morning until evening. Again, just an error in logic here to say that because the time that he sat before them was morning until evening, that was on the next day. If it said, that the next day was a longer period of time, it said it was past the evening, for example, then that would be a problem. If it said on the next day he sat from morning until night, then that would mean that the next day included morning and night. Okay, but it doesn't. It says morning and evening when the next day comes to an end. So this again is actually supporting it. Exodus 32, 5-6 says, and Aharon saw and built an altar before it, and Aharon called out and said, tomorrow is a festival to Yehovah. And they rose early on the next day and offered burnt offerings. Now, this is an error in logic as well, because people think that when it says early on the next day, that it means that only a few hours had passed into the next day, or the next day had only been for a brief amount of time. But that's not what the early refers to. The early is what they did. They rose early. So they'd gone to sleep the night before, and they rose early. Okay? That just pertains to when they're getting up. It doesn't pertain to only a small amount of time having passed of that particular day. Again, it's just an error of logic. People not understanding what they're actually reading. Numbers 11:32 says, and the people were up all that day, all that night, all the next day. Okay? So people will look at this and they'll say, well, there you go. All that day and all that night, that's one day. And then the next day, all the next day as well. So the next day isn't that day and that night. It starts in the morning. It must start in the morning. That must be what it means. But no, it's not what it's saying. Okay, this is concerning the difference between a day, a 24-hour period. Okay, the word yom in Hebrew can mean day, a 24-hour period. Can also mean day as opposed to night. Okay, so when it says they're up all that day, that's the daytime period, all that night, the nighttime period, and all the next day, daytime period. Doesn't actually talk about when the day starts whatsoever. Genesis 1:16-19, we see this difference. It says, and Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. And Elohim set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, to separate the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the fourth day. So we've got day, 24-hour period, day, daytime, night, nighttime, both periods within the wider day. And it's just an error in logic. Acts 20:6-7 says, and we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came to them at Troas in 5 days. Ooh, they're observing the days of unleavened bread in the New Testament. That's weird. Where we stayed 7 days. Okay, obviously this is talking about 24-hour days. It's not talking about, we just stayed there for the daylight periods. In the night we got up and went somewhere else. And on the first day of the week, the disciples, having gathered together to break bread, Shaul, intending to depart the next day, was reasoning with them and was extending the word till midnight. Okay, so they met on the first day of the week. And to explain this, I'm going to use our paganized names for days. That would be Saturday evening to Sunday evening. That's the first day, okay, that they would have been keeping. And he intended to depart the next day. However, he was reasoning with them and extending the word till midnight, which went into the next day. Okay, so this is showing us that he was intending to depart the next day, but actually the teaching went on and he was extending the word until midnight, part of the next day. Joshua 7 verse 6 says, and Yehoshua tore his garment and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of Yehovah until evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. So this is when they come up against the men of Ai, when Achan is taking the set apart things. And they suffered defeat at the hands of the men of Ai because of the sin of Achan. Verse 13 is what Yehovah says to him. He says, rise up, set the people apart, and you shall say, set yourselves apart for tomorrow, because thus said Yehovah Elohim of Yisrael, that which is under the ban is in your midst. O Yisrael, you are not able to stand before your enemies until you put away that which is under the ban out of your midst. And you shall be brought near in the morning according to your tribes. And it shall be, the tribe which Yehovah takes comes according to clans. So people will say, this was the evening. He's told, set yourselves apart for tomorrow, and then you'll be brought near in the morning. So If the day was starting at evening, then how can he refer to the morning as the next day? Okay? All it's saying is, he was there all day until evening. Okay? As I say, evening is the transition. The day comes to an end in the evening. That's as it's drawing to a close. The next day will start later evening, often referred to as twilight in the scriptures. So he was there all day until evening, just at the end of the day. And Yehovah says, okay, rise up, set the people apart and say to them, set yourselves apart for tomorrow because Yehovah is going to be there. What does it mean for them to set themselves apart? How are they going to make themselves holy? What it means is they're not going to defile themselves. They're not going to become unclean that night, such as having sex with your spouse. That would make you unclean. So as it came round to evening, they were told, stay holy, which they would need to know in the evening. Okay, stay holy. Don't make yourself unclean from this point onwards, because this is when the next day starts, and tomorrow in the morning, Yehovah is going to come and do this. Judges 19:9. This is the story of the man who comes with his concubine who ends up being raped and cut up into 12 pieces and stuff. It says, and the man arose to go, he and his concubine and his servant, but his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, see, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Stay here and let your heart be glad, and you shall rise early tomorrow for your journey. Now, we could look at this and we could be intellectually dishonest, and we could say, look, it says right here that the day is coming to an end in the evening. But what did we just see? Sometimes when it's talking about day, it's talking about day as opposed to night, which would make sense that it was doing here. So we can't be intellectually dishonest and say, look, it's saying it plainly here. The day is now drawing towards evening. Please spend the night. Okay? And this word, spend the night, means to lodge or pass the night. Day, drawing towards evening. Pass the night, then wake up early and go tomorrow. So he's saying this the evening before. He's saying rise early tomorrow. He's not saying the day doesn't start at twilight that night. He's just saying this in the evening. Do you understand? Okay, the day is drawing towards evening. Spend the night, which is going to be part of the next day. The day is coming to an end, the daytime. Stay here, let your heart be glad, and you shall rise early. Again, it's to do with rising early, not it being only a few hours into the day. Rise early tomorrow. Okay, this is going to be tomorrow. They're going to rise early during the daytime tomorrow as well. No contradiction here. This is not a verse which necessitates that the day starts at dawn. 1 Samuel 9:19 says, and Shemuel answered Shaul and said, I am the seer, go up before me to the high place, and you shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I shall let you go, and make known to you all that is in your heart. And verse 26 says, and they rose early, and it came to be about the dawning of the day. Interesting phrase. Okay, the dawning of the day. Maybe it's the day is starting at the dawn. Maybe that's what it's saying. This is a translational error. Okay. It came to pass about the spring. Okay. It doesn't say dawning. It's the word Allah. Charlie looked at the ascending offering last week, and that is the Olah offering from the word Allah. The Allah of the day. Is it the word day though? Is it Yom? It's not the word Yom. It's the word Shachar. Okay, so let's look at those words. Allah means to go up, to ascend, to climb. And Shachar means dawn. So what it's actually saying is at the ascending of the dawn. Not saying at the dawning of the day. Okay, basic translational error. But you can see why people get these things wrong, can't you? 1 Samuel 19:10-11 says, and Shaul sought to smite the spear through David and into the wall, but he slipped away from the presence of Shaul, so he smote the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. So David's escaping that night. Okay, so that would be the beginning of the day, the night time. And Shaul sent messages to David's house to watch him, and to put him to death in the morning. Okay, he escaped that night. Messengers are sent to put him to death in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, declared to David, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you are put to death. Oh, okay. So he escapes in the night. Messengers are going to kill him in the morning. His wife said, if you don't escape tonight, tomorrow you're going to be put to death. So is she saying that the morning is going to be tomorrow? You understand why people would think that? Use some logic in the situation, though. Okay? Shaul has sent messengers to kill David. Do you think that he told his wife about it? His wife doesn't know. She's not telling him what Saul has done. And this is confusing as well. If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you are put to death. She's not saying you're going to be put to death tomorrow. Better translation of it is, if you don't save your life, if you don't save yourself tonight, you'll be dead tomorrow. Okay, so in the nighttime, she says, flee. If you don't save yourself tonight, by the time it comes around to tomorrow, you're going to be dead. That's what it says in the Hebrew. It's a translational error, and it's also an error in logic here. 1 Samuel 28, 18 to 19 says, and Shaul disguised himself and put on other garments, and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. Night, definitely the beginning of the day here that's being spoken of. And he said, please divine for me and bring up for me the one I shall name. Further, Yehovah also, this is verse 8. I remember changing it because I thought 19, it must be 18 and 19. It's verse 8 this. And in verse 19, this is the response from Shemuel. Further, Yehovah also gives Yisrael with you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons are with me. Okay, so they came by night, says that tomorrow they're going to be with him, and the Philistines are going to attack Israel in the day. It transpires that it happens in the day. So how is this the case? Simply the case in the same way as David's wife saying to him, tomorrow you're dead. It's exactly what Samuel was saying to him. Came at the beginning of the day, and he says, by tomorrow you and your sons are with me in Sheol. You're going to be dead by tomorrow. It's not saying that this is going to happen tomorrow. It's going to say they're going to kill you, and the day after, by that time, you're going to be with me. The day before, you're going to be getting killed. The day after, you're going to be with me in Sheol. Okay? 1 Samuel 30, 16 to 17 says, and he brought him down and saw that they were spread out over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing because of all the spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Yehudah. And David smote them from twilight until the evening of the next day. And none of them escaped except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So David smote them from twilight until the evening of the next day. This must mean that the evening of the next day is after the twilight. But again, this is a very slight translational error. Okay? It says in the Hebrew, from the twilight. Again, the word is neshef, and it's meha neshef. Okay? In the evening, from the evening. From the twilight even, the twilight, which is important to understand this, because then you read this verse and it says, David smote them from the twilight until the evening of the next day, which shows us that the twilight and the evening are all part of the next day. Tells us absolutely concretely here that the day goes from twilight until evening. It's another concrete example of the scriptures telling us, but this is one of the verses that people will bring up simply because of translational error. Jonah 4, 6 to 7 says, and Yehovah Elohim appointed the plant and made it come up over Jonah to be a shade for his head, to deliver him from his discomfort, and Jonah greatly rejoiced for the plant. But as the morning dawned the next day, Elohim appointed the worm which attacked the plant, so it withered. So people will say, okay, so the next day, it's starting in the morning, and Elohim appointed the worm which attacked the plant. Okay, this all happened the next day. It was a shade for his head. When do you need the shade? Do you need the shade at night time? Of course you don't need the shade at night time. So the worm comes as morning dawned, as the sun came out the next day, and it was going to be an issue for him again, and he'd need the shade. Elohim appointed the worm which attacked the plant. None of this tells us anything about when the day starts. Okay, it's just an error in logic again to think that it does. Romans 13:11-13 gives us a very interesting spiritual insight into this. It says, "And do this, knowing the time, that it is already the hour for us to wake up from sleep. And now our deliverance is nearer than when we did believe. The night is far advanced. The day has come near." Okay? It comes first, night, then the day comes. In our spiritual walks, we walk in darkness first, and then we walk in light. Okay? So in the idea of this being a day that we're experiencing, we start in the darkness, and then the light comes at the end. So let us put off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us walk becomingly as in the day. Okay? Not in wild parties and drunkenness, not in living together and in indecencies, not in fighting and envy. So what is the way that it works out? What's the spiritual thing that's being taught through the night coming first and then the day? Well, that's exactly the same with our spiritual walk as well. Now, these things can be confusing, okay? And in the Torah movement, there is so much confusion. Nobody is on the same page about anything at all. Everyone's all over the place. And what you're getting is you get these groups on Facebook where everybody's trying to teach each other the Torah, and it just descends into nonsense where everybody's saying something different to someone else, and nobody really knows anything that's going on. Everyone's on a completely different page doctrinally. And everyone says, when Messiah comes, it will be sorted out. When Messiah comes, we will be unified in our faith. Which is true. It will be. But we don't have to wait until then. Hebrews 13:7-9 says, "Remember those leading you who spoke the word of Elohim to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their belief. Yeshua Messiah is the same yesterday and today and forever. Do not be borne about by various and strange teachings." Okay? This is the Torah movement. Everyone's borne about by various and strange teachings. "For it is good for the heart to be established by favor or grace, not with foods which have not profited those who have been occupied with them. And those foods, those strange doctrines and teachings have not profited those who have been occupied by them. All it's done is made the entire Torah movement descend into nonsense and confusion, and everybody teaching each other just nonsense basically that they've come up with on their own. And everyone thinks they're being led by the Ruach. Everyone thinks, oh, I've learned this from God himself. But it's nonsense. If that were true, then everyone would be on the same page if the Ruach was teaching everybody. That's not how it's supposed to work. Ephesians 4:11-14 says, "And he himself gave some as apostles, some as prophets, and some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers," who are one category, pastors and teachers, shepherds and teachers, "for the perfecting of the set-apart ones, to the work of the service, to a building up of the body of Messiah, until we all come to the unity of belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah." When Messiah comes, so that we should no longer be children tossed about and borne by every wind of teaching or every wind of doctrine. We're not meant to be like that. What's meant to prevent us from being in this state is he's given these people to teach us doctrine. Okay? This is how the body works. The body is meant to work. One part of the body does one thing, and they leave the other part of it to the one that has been appointed to that part of the body. 1 Corinthians 12:17-21 says, "If all the body was an eye, where would be the hearing?" But everyone wants to be the eye, don't they? Everyone wants to teach the doctrine and learn the doctrine, and I've got it all from the Ruach himself. It's nonsense. If all the body was an eye, where would be the hearing? If all hearing, where would be the smelling? Okay, we've got specific roles. We need to stick to our specific roles and stop trying to teach each other all of this nonsense. We need to go to the teachers for the doctrine because they're the part of the body which teaches the doctrine. But now Elohim has set the members, each one of them in the body, even as he is pleased, or even as he pleased. And if they all had been one member, where would the body be? And now there are indeed many members, but one body. And an eye is unable to say to the hand, I have no need of you. Or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. And yet, it's almost become like this badge of honor in the Torah movement to say, we don't have teachers anymore. I have one teacher, and that is the Ruach, the Messiah himself. He's teaching me. We don't need teachers. And you are a body of Messiah and members individually. And Elohim has appointed these in the assembly. Firstly, apostles. Secondly, prophets. Thirdly, teachers. After that, miracles. Then gifts of healing, helps, ministrations, kinds of tongue. Okay, so here, right in the context of him saying, don't get rid of parts of the body, it's actually saying these are parts of the body which have been instituted by Elohim. Apostles, prophets, teachers. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Apparently. That's the way that it seems. Are all workers of miracles? Let's understand, when I talked before about a verb, and then you're having a noun form of that verb, and that means that they do that verb, okay? We've got apostles. What is an apostle? People think there were 12 apostles, and that's all the apostles that there ever were, okay? No. There were 12 disciples, but there were many more disciples than that. We hear about 120 disciples in one place. The 12 apostles and the 12 disciples were just 12 specific ones of that type. The word in Greek is this, apostolos, okay? And this is the noun, and it's the name for an apostle, but it is the noun form of a verb. Romans 10:14-15 says, how shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without one proclaiming? And how shall they proclaim if they are not sent? Okay, so the ones proclaiming the word must be sent. In the Greek, the word sent is apostello. That's the verb. Apostle is one who is sent. That's all that it means. One who is sent. It's not like this special category. You have people on Facebook, don't you? I am Apostle Jonathan. All of that nonsense. I think that it's this special thing. All it is somebody who has been sent. That's all that the word apostle means, one who is sent. That's why Paul can be an apostle even though he wasn't one of the 12 apostles. When Matthias is chosen as the 12th apostle, Paul can also be an apostle, he's just not one of the 12. Numbers 12:1-2 gives us some very interesting insight into how people receive this information. As I say, it's become a badge of honor for everybody to think, I'm not taught by anyone. Okay, we've done away with the teachers. It says, now Miriam and Aharon spoke against Moshe because of the Cushite woman whom he had taken. For he had taken a Cushite woman. And they said, has Yehovah spoken only through Moshe? Has he not also spoken through us? And Yehovah heard. That's what people do. They say, is Yehovah only spoken through this teacher? What, we're to go to the teacher for the doctrine? Does Yehovah only speak through them? Doesn't he speak through us as well? Yehovah heard. He wasn't very happy about it. We'll get to that when we get to the book of Numbers. Numbers 16:1-3. And Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kehath, and son of Levi, took both Dathan and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, and On, sons of Peleth, sons of Reuven, and they rose up before Moshe with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, called ones of the meeting, men of name. So these were people with a reputation in the congregation, 250 of them. And they assembled against Moshe and against Aharon and said to them, enough of you, for all the congregation is set apart. Everyone's holy. All of the congregation is holy. And Yehovah is in their midst. Yehovah's in my midst. I've got the Ruach. Okay, all of us are set apart, not just you. Yehovah's in their midst. Why then do you lift yourselves up above the assembly of Yehovah? And this is the reaction, isn't it? Why are you? You think that you're special. You're some teacher. Why have you lifted yourself up above the assembly? But again, this is the error on the behalf of the people. We're told we are all brethren. Okay? We're all brethren. No one is above anyone else. We're all a body, and that body has got different roles. Some people are teachers. Some people are leaders. But that doesn't mean that they are above the congregation. This was a misunderstanding on these people's behalf. But this is exactly the same attitude that people have, and they don't realize that they are actually quoting from the two moments of rebellion which were punished strongly by Yehovah. Acts 17:11 says, "Now these were more noble than those in Thessalonica who received the word with great eagerness and searched the scriptures daily if these words were so." What does everyone say? I'm a Berean. I'm a Berean. I will go and I will find out if this is correct. Have you not read of the Bereans in the scripture? I am one of them. Well, it's quite ironic that they use this verse in order to prove that you're to go against what the teachers are saying, or that you're actually to work it out for yourself. And it's okay, I'll listen to loads of teachers and I'll work it all out for myself, and I'll go to the scriptures and I'll be a Berean and I'll have it all sorted. Let's read the context. Having passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a congregation of the Yehudim, a congregation of the Jews. There was a congregation of the Jews in Thessalonica. According to his practice, Shaul went in unto them, and for 3 Sabbaths was reasoning with them from the scriptures. So Paul goes to the congregation of the Jews and he's reasoning with them from the scriptures, explaining and pointing out that the Messiah had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and saying, "This is the Messiah, Yeshua, who I proclaim to you." So what was he doing? He was going to congregations of the Jews and he was telling them the Messiah had come. Some of them did believe, and a large number of the worshipping Greeks and not a few of the honorable women joined Shaul and Silas. So some of them joined Paul, of the ones at Thessalonica. But the Yehudim who did not believe, having become envious, took some of the wicked men from the marketplace, and gathering a mob, set all the city in an uproar, and came upon the house of Jason, and was seeking to bring them out to the people. But not finding them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers to the city rulers, crying out, "They who have turned the world upside down have come here too, whom Jason has received." And all of them are acting contrary to the dogmas of Caesar, saying there is another sovereign, Yeshua. And they troubled the crowd and the city rulers when they heard this. So this is the people at Thessalonica. This is how they received Paul when he came to them and said, "The Messiah has come." Some of them believed, some of them went and caused trouble for them. And when they had received the pledge from Jason and the rest, they let them go. And the brothers immediately sent Shaul and Silas away by night to Berea, who having come, went to the congregation of the Yehudim. So what did they do? They left the congregation of Jews at Thessalonica and went to the congregation of Jews at Berea. And then we've got the famous verse. "Now these were more noble than those in Thessalonica, who received the word with great eagerness, searched the scriptures daily if these words were so." So what were they doing? They were going back to the scriptures to see if the Messiah had come. They weren't questioning all of the teaching and reckoning the teaching for themselves, which is how everybody misuses this verse, showing, in fact, that they don't understand the scriptures in such a way to even apply this verse, making it ironic. Then many of them truly believed, and also not a few of the Greeks, decent women as well as men. And when the Yehudim from Thessalonica came to know that the word of Elohim was proclaimed by Shaul at Berea, they came there also and stirred up the crowds. So the Jews at Berea were more honorable than those at Thessalonica, and they actually listened to what Paul had to say and went to the scriptures to see whether it was true that the Messiah had come. Here's another great one. 1 Thessalonians 5:21, "Test everything, hold to that which is good." Oh, I'm just testing it. The scriptures tell me to test everything. So I'm just testing it. Just doing what the scriptures say. That's what you're to do. You're to test everything. Anything that comes up, they're like, "Well, yeah, you've got to test everything though, haven't you? Prove everything." Okay, the word everything is this word, pas. And the way the Greek works is you will have a word like this, and it will be modified. It'll have letters put on the end, or however it's modified. And that will show whether it's in the first person, whether it's in the second person, whether it's in the third person. First person, I, when I'm saying something about I. Second person, when I'm saying something about you. Third person, when I'm talking about them, essentially. So this is pas, meaning every or all in the third person. So it can mean all things, can certainly mean that. So it says test, and then this word in the third person. test everything, test all things, okay? Could be translated like that. However, if we read it in context, we see how it should be translated. Do not quench the spirit. Do not despise prophecies. Prove them all. The third person is used of the prophecies in context. It's not saying test everything. It's saying test all of the prophecies. Hold fast to that which is good. Again, it's ironic that I have to explain this to people who want to use this verse to say that they don't need a teacher to explain the word of God to them. James 3 verse 1 says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we shall all receive greater judgment. Yet people want to do that, don't they? They want to teach themselves. They want to become the teacher in the body, and they want to teach themselves, and they want to teach other people. Oh no, this is what the doctrine says. You'll get a post on Facebook about, oh, I need to break the Sabbath for this. Is this okay? And then you'll get like 50 people all giving them different pieces of... Okay? You get the 50 people all giving different pieces of advice about whether it's okay to break the Sabbath or not. They're all just being teachers. And they're told here, don't become teachers. The teachers will receive greater judgment. So when a teacher says something, okay, they are held accountable to Yehovah then at that point for what they teach to people. So if you go to a teacher and you follow their doctrine, which is what the scriptures say to do, and it turns out to be wrong, it's fine for you because you've been obeying the scriptures. It's not fine for the teacher. The teacher's the one that gets it in the neck. Okay? This is why it's not good to teach other people. What I'm not saying, incidentally, is that if I ever teach something and you think it's wrong, that you've just got to accept it. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? You come to me and you say, I think this that you taught there was wrong. Well, I don't get this. Can you please explain it to me? I'm not saying that I'm going to get everything right for all time. What I'm saying is when you think something is wrong, you don't go off and then teach other people, oh no, I think that thing that they were saying was wrong. This is the way that we should do it. Okay? You come to the person, you address it to the person, and you say, I don't think that's right. Please go through the scriptures with me. Because Yehovah, by his spirit, by his Ruach, gives people the ability to teach the word of Elohim, and he gives them understanding of the scriptures. They have a much wider context of the scriptures to draw from. So when you can go to them with one scripture and say, I think that this scripture goes against what you're saying, they'll be able to explain it in context, which is why it's not good for people to think that something that is wrong, hold it in their heart, and go off and act contrary to the teaching simply because they think they've got it right. Okay, what you do is you go to the teacher and you rebuke the teacher or you exhort the teacher, and then you come to a reasoning between you. 1 Timothy 4, 3-4 says, For there shall be a time when they shall not bear sound teaching, but according to their own desires they shall heap up for themselves teachers tickling the ear. Because this is what people do, isn't it? They don't like what's taught, so they amass teachers that agree with them, and they listen to them instead. And they shall indeed turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to myths. Wow, what a perfect description of the Torah movement at the moment. People being turned aside from what the Torah actually says and then going after all of these myths. You know, the serpent seed doctrine or whatever it is. I'm not going to go through a big list because I'll just get a ton of comments going, oh no, this doctrine's actually a good doctrine. Okay? They turn away their ears from hearing the Torah and they go after all of this nonsense because they've heaped up for themselves teachers tickling the ear. Good piece of advice is when somebody says, I'm not a teacher, I'm just a fellow student of the word with you, which is what a whole ton of people who are well known in the Torah movement will say. Don't go to them to learn your doctrine because they've said absolutely explicitly, I'm not a teacher, I'm just a fellow student. And most of the time they are not somebody who is following a teacher. They're just somebody who's off on their own, guided by the Ruach about what is right and coming up with all of these strange things that don't agree with everyone else who's guided by the Ruach. Don't go to them. They're not teachers. They've just told you that they're not teachers. Go to teachers of the word, people who have got that role within the body. They will give you the doctrine, and that is how we come to unity of faith until Messiah comes back. Hebrews 8:10-11 says, because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Jehovah, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And they shall by no means teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother. What? People want to walk in the new covenant, and this is exactly what they want to do. It's all that they want to do. I'll tell you what, let's not be taught the scriptures. Let's all sit down and we'll all just discuss the scriptures between each other. We'll all just teach each other a load of nonsense. That would be better, wouldn't it? No, that would be nonsense. Matthew 23:1-11 says, then Yeshua spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on the seat of Moshe. Therefore, whatever they say to you to keep and do, but do not according to their works, for they say and do not. When they teach you the Torah, do the Torah, but don't do according to what they do, because they teach the Torah, but they don't do it. Don't take them as an example. But what they teach you, that you should do. For they bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders, but with their finger they do not wish to move them. And they do all their works to be seen of men. This is the problem with the scribes and Pharisees, okay? Outwardly, they were very righteous. They were teachers of the Torah. Oh, yes, we should do the Torah. But inwardly, they were full of dead men's bones. They were like graves. And they do all their works to be seen of men. And they make the tefillin wide. And they keep the zitziot of their they lengthen the zitziot of their garments. They wear a big, massive zitzit so that everyone looks at them and go, wow, how holy are they? Look at the meter-long zitzit. And they love they love the best places at feasts and the best seats in the congregations. They love the applause of men. They love the respect and honor of men. And greetings in the marketplaces and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. That's what they love. That's all that they're about. But you, do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Messiah, and you are all brothers. So this is the verse, isn't it? The people will say, oh no, do not be called teachers. You're all brothers. One's your teacher, Messiah, just you'll be led by the Ruach into a load of nonsense, and everyone else will be led into a load of nonsense, and that's just how Yehovah wants it. No, we've got to read this in the context. What Yeshua is not doing here is he's not denying the Torah, which the Levites are the teachers in the Torah, aren't they? They were scattered among Israel to do the teaching. What Messiah is doing isn't coming and saying, oh no, all of that in the Torah about having teachers. Don't do that. One's your teacher, Messiah. It's in the context of the scribes and the Pharisees who've raised themselves up above the people. Like it was saying, okay, you're all members of a body. You're all brothers. Some of you are going to have the role of teaching. Don't be like the scribes and the Pharisees who love all of the honor of men. They love to be called Rabbi, Rabbi, teacher, teacher. Okay? Don't be into any of that. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your father, he who is in the heavens. He's not saying, oh, the Torah where it says honor your father and your mother. Just, don't bother with that. Don't call anyone father. In fact, one is your father, him who is in heaven. How much greater misunderstanding of Yeshua's words could you have? Neither be called leaders, for one is your leader, the Messiah. Okay? Don't raise yourself above the body. You're all brothers. You're all one body. Don't be raised above. Okay? Yes, fulfill the role that you have in the body, but don't go after it like these men are. But the greatest among you shall be your servant. That's the whole thing of being a part of the body. The people who are to teach are not the ones who love the limelight. Usually the people who love the limelight, if they're given the role of teacher, they do it wrong, and they're all more concerned about what people think of them than teaching the truth, which might be hard for people to accept sometimes. Okay? If you love the limelight, you love other people's attention on you. So it's going to be difficult when that attention on you turns to be bad because you've just told someone, no, that's sin, you can't do it. Okay? Greatest among you shall be your servant. They're probably not going to like the role that they've been given of teacher. They're going to do it and they're going to serve other people, but they're not going to be like these people who love to be in front of people with their big long tzitzits and striding about in the marketplace and to be called Rabbi, Rabbi by men. So this is what Yeshua is talking about here. Hebrews 13:17 says, obey those leading you and be subject to them, for they watch for your lives as having to give account. The people who are leading have to give account for the lives of the people that they're leading. They're under a greater judgment. When they're teaching them doctrine and they're telling them what to do, they are to be obeyed, and that doctrine is to be followed. However, they're going to have to give account to Yehovah for every word that they've spoken and how they've led people. Let them do so with joy and not groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. And there, we'll take a break and come back in the third part and look at how our flesh is defiled and why it needs to be cleansed in the temple. Okay, so in this part, what we're going to have a look at is we're going to have a look at the concept of what an offering is in the first place, what it achieves, how we draw near to Yehovah through it. We're also going to have a look at what the book of Hebrews means. Okay, because people will say, won't they, Yeshua's sacrifice was once for all, so now all the sacrifices, they're all done away with. We don't need to do them anymore. We're going to have a look at what defilement of the flesh is. Okay, it says that we need our flesh cleansed by the blood of those things offered in the tabernacle. So, what? Why do we need to have our flesh cleansed? That's just a concept that is so alien to us. So we're going to look at what the scriptures say about that. Now, the concept of an offering, the reason why people would draw near with an offering, I mentioned it before, but they would have material things that meant something to them. And by them going and offering it to Yehovah, they would be saying, this is dead important to me. I need this thing, but I need relationship with Yehovah more. And when they gave up this thing, whatever it was, Yehovah would bless them and he would provide for them. And so in doing that, it's an example of what Charlie was talking about when he said that until you shema something, until you obey it, you're not going to understand it. You can kind of intellectually understand it from the outside, but you're not going to actually understand the process. Like coming with your livestock that you really needed, coming with your grain that you really needed, giving it up to Yehovah and being like, now what? What are we going to do now? We've given the firstborn and the best of this and the best of that to Yehovah. And then Yehovah responds and blesses these people. And then they're like, now I understand. Now I feel closer to Yehovah. I've drawn near to him and he is drawn near to me. And now my relationship of faith in Yehovah is so much stronger. That's why he commands these things. He could just do it all a different way. He could go, okay, I'm going to give this to this person, this to that person, but then no one would learn anything from it. So the people actually had to bring the things, offer them to Yehovah, and then see him working in their lives. And we see other things like that as well in the commandments. Exodus 34:21, 6 days you work, but on the seventh day you rest. In plowing time and in harvest you rest. Okay? Even if something is dead important to you, you rest. You don't do anything on the Sabbath, even if it's of critical importance, like it's plowing time, and you're like, we need to work in the fields today, or harvest time. We need to work in the fields today. No, you rest. You have faith in Yehovah. He's the one that provides. You just do the commandment. That's all that you need to concern yourself with. Leviticus 25:1-12 says, and Yehovah spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall observe a Sabbath to Yehovah. This is a big act of faith for them to do this. 6 years you sow your field, and 6 years you prune your vineyard and gather in its fruit. But in the seventh year, the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to Yehovah. Do not sow your field and do not prune your vineyard. Imagine this command being given to an agrarian culture that depended on planting things in order for them to have food to eat. So 6 years you do that, you gather in all your food. But on the seventh year, you do not sow, you do not reap. Yehovah will provide more for you in the previous years. Think about the faith that it takes to do something like this. Do not reap what grows of its own of your harvest, and do not gather the grapes of your unpruned vine. In other words, the stuff that just grows in the land anyway, even though you've not sowed the land, don't even go into your fields to harvest that. For it is a year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be to you for food. Do you get what it's saying? It's saying that if you keep this command, Yehovah is going to provide for you. And actually keeping this command will be to you for food. That's where your provision's going to come from. You've got the relationship backwards. You think, I need to go out, I need to strive, I need to work on this day, we need to work all of the Sabbath year in order to bring in food. Yehovah says, no, it doesn't work like that. Don't work on this year, and that will be food to you. That's where your provision's truly going to come from. And in that way, people again draw close to Yehovah. They go, this is insane. We're not to plant anything in the field for an entire year. We're going to die. And then they do it. They shema. They observe that. They see that Yehovah blesses them, and they draw closer in relationship to Yehovah. And you think, well, this command, this must have been difficult for people to keep. And indeed, the house of Judah were taken into captivity in Babylon for 70 years. The reason that they were taken into captivity in Babylon is because they were not observing this commandment. They did it their own way. And so they were taken into exile and punished for not keeping this command. And for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, all its crops are for food. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. So you count to 7, you have a Sabbath. You count to 7, you have a Sabbath. All the way until 49 years, and the 49th year will be the 7th Sabbath of years. Then you shall sound a ram's horn to pass through on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, Yom Kippur. Cause a ram's horn to pass through all your land. And you shall set the 50th year apart. So not only have they got the 49th year as a Sabbath where they don't plant the land, the 50th year as well. They set that apart and proclaim release through all the land to its inhabitants. It is a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to its possession, and each of you return to his clan. The 50th year is a jubilee to you. Do not sow, do not reap what grows of its own, nor gather from its unpruned vine. It is a jubilee. It is set apart to you. Eat from the field its crops. Okay, so he's saying again, this is going to be your food. This is going to be your nourishment. Keeping this commandment, this is where all this provision is going to come from. Again, to these people who didn't have faith in the word of God, they'd say, what we're not to plant in the 49th year, then we're not to plant in the 50th year. There's 2 years that we're going to be without food. There's no way that we're going to do that. You must be insane to think, oh, I'm just going to have faith in God and everything will be okay. The whole land's going to fall apart. Nobody's going to have any food, and then we're all going to die. And then who will there be to worship Yehovah then? Oh, the reasoning of man. This is the sort of thing that you shema, you obey, and then you begin to re'eh, you begin to see, you begin to understand how it is that Yehovah works, that he is Elohim in heaven, and he does supernaturally provide for you. But how are you ever going to understand that if you won't observe the commandment and depend on him for your provision? Deuteronomy 15, 7-10 says, when there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers, within any of the gates in your land, which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, do not harden your heart nor shut your hand from your poor brother. You shall certainly open your hand to him and certainly lend him enough for his need, whatever he needs. Be on guard lest there be a thought of Belial in your heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release is near, and your eye is evil against your poor brother, and you give him naught, and he shall cry out to Yehovah against you, and it shall be a sin to you. So in the 7th year, all debts were forgiven. So imagine the situation, okay? There's 3 weeks left until the 7th year. Someone, your poor brother, comes to you, and they're like, I'm going to lose my house. I need £10,000. Will you lend me it? In that situation, it would be tempting to think, in three weeks, I'm going to have to forgive that debt. There's no way I'm going to give you 10 grand. What are you talking about? We're told specifically, don't have that thought in your heart. Why? You shall certainly give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him, because for this reason, Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your works and in all to which you put your hand. So, because you've done this, Yehovah is going to bless you abundantly. But to the mind that doesn't believe in Yehovah, all they can see is, in 3 weeks I'm going to have to forgive that 10 grand. And what am I going to do? Just be without 10 grand? That's going to be great, isn't it? No, Yehovah says, do this, Yehovah's going to bless you. Again, we shema, we obey the commandment, and then we re'eh, we have that closer drawing near to Yehovah. Exodus 34:23, 3 times in a year, all your men are to appear before the Master Yehovah, the Elohim of Israel. So they'd have to go up to Jerusalem 3 times in the year at the feasts. Okay? For I dispossess nations before you and shall enlarge your borders, and let no one covet your land when you go to appear before Yehovah your Elohim. So imagine the situation again. Okay? You live on the border, in the border towns of Israel. You know that the enemy is just over the border. Thinking, go up to Jerusalem. All of us go up to, all the men go to Jerusalem. Are you insane? The enemy are going to see all of us going to Jerusalem, and all they're going to do is move into our houses. There's no way I'm going to go up to Jerusalem. That doesn't make any sense to me. Yehovah, though, he's promised, I will not allow anyone to covet your land when you go to appear before Yehovah. I will not allow it. So, to the person who's got faith, they've got no problem. They're like, oh, the enemy's just there. It doesn't matter, though. This is going to be funny. I'll go to Jerusalem. When I come back, everything will be better than it was before, because Yehovah's going to bless me for my obedience in going up to Jerusalem. That's how the man of faith acts. Malachi 3:10-11, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, and let there be food in my house. And please prove me in this. Please test me in this, said Yehovah Sebaot, whether I do not open for you the windows of the heavens and shall pour out for you a boundless blessing. So imagine the situation. You've just brought in all your crop. Okay? You're thinking, I need everything. I'm a poor person. I need everything here. Everything I can get. There's no way that I can give 10% to Yehovah. That would be insane. 10% of the stuff that I've got, giving it to Yehovah. That doesn't make any sense at all. I cannot afford to do this. But what does the man of faith say? The man of faith says, Yehovah says, prove me in this. Do this, and I'll open the windows of heaven to you and pour out boundless blessing. The man of faith goes, that sounds like the better option than keeping 10% of the stuff I've already got. And I shall rebuke the devourer for you, so that it does not destroy the fruit of the ground, nor does the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field. That's an interesting bit of scripture, isn't it? The devourer is responsible for destroying the fruit of the ground, and the vine not bearing fruit. And Yehovah's going to rebuke the devourer, whatever's responsible for that, and stop it from doing that and making you produce more abundantly. Okay, so the question comes, what about the offerings and the sacrifices? They were to bring offerings and sacrifices back then. Surely, though, we're not to bring offerings and sacrifices now. Surely Yeshua's sacrifice has been once and for all. Okay, that's what the book of Hebrews says after all, isn't it? Everyone knows that. Hebrews 9:13-14 says, for if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the defiled sets apart for the cleansing of the flesh, okay, so what do the sacrifices in the temple do? They cleanse the flesh. How much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience? Okay, so the things in the temple cleansed you from sin in your flesh, how you are defiled in the flesh, sin. They cleansed your flesh from that. Yeshua's sacrifice cleansed your conscience. Okay, it was his blood sprinkled on your heart where the evil conscience was, the filthy garments which Joshua was clothed in, and he's taken away your guilt before Yehovah. Because you could have your flesh cleansed, but that wouldn't really help you, would it, when you stand before Yehovah if you're still guilty of having broken his law? All well and good, my flesh has been cleansed. The sins have been cleansed from my flesh. Okay, great. But I'm still going to stand before Yehovah. I'm still going to be guilty before him. I'm still going to have the defiled conscience before him. So Yeshua's sacrifice was for the conscience. The ones in the temple were for the cleansing of the flesh. But what does that even mean? We can think, okay, so we haven't got a temple. Doesn't bother me. Oh, I will no longer be able to have my flesh cleansed. Big deal. What's the problem? Okay, we need to understand what it is to have the flesh cleansed and what the problem is in the first place, and why it would be better to have the temple and Yeshua's sacrifice than just Yeshua's sacrifice. If we were going to have one or the other, Yeshua's sacrifice is the one that we need, so that when we stand before Elohim, we do not bear our guilt before him. He's cleansed our conscience before Elohim. However, it would be better if we could have the flesh cleansed as well. We just don't have a temple anymore. It's been destroyed. Jude 1:3-4 said, beloved ones, making all haste to write to you concerning our common deliverance or common salvation, same word. I felt the necessity to write to you, urging you to earnestly contend for the belief which was once for all delivered to the set-apart ones. For certain men have slipped in, whose judgment was written about long ago, wicked ones perverting the favor or the grace of our Elohim for indecency and denying the only Master Yehovah and our Master Yeshua Messiah. Okay, these are the people who fill all the churches, who have turned the grace of God into a reason to sin. They've turned the grace of God into indecency instead of using it as a reason to repent. In the same way, indeed, these dreamers defile the flesh. Okay? In the same way. How? Pervert the grace of God, use it as an excuse to sin. They pervert it by indecency, by breaking the Torah. That's how your flesh is made defiled. That's what it needs to be cleansed from. The sin that is in your flesh. That is where sin dwells. It dwells in the flesh, and that's what we need to be cleansed of, because we've all sinned. We can have the guilt removed before Yehovah. However, the sin defiles the flesh. So our flesh in this state is defiled, and without a temple it will never become undefiled. Talking of the sin in the flesh. Okay, so we're now actually at the end of the day. Everyone's gone home. In the third part, it cut off because the memory card got full. So it just stopped recording. So I'm going to go over again the things that I was going over in the third part. So this is the verse that I was up to when it all cut off. It says, therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body to obey it in its desires. So what is actually happening here is Paul just waxing lyrical to people, do not let sin which dwells in you, do not obey its desires. Okay? He's actually quoting the Torah. Genesis 4:5-7 says, but he did not look to Cain and his offering, and Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. And Yehovah said to Cain, why are you wroth, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it. What did Paul say? He said, do not let sin reign in your mortal body to obey it in its desires, because sin dwells in our bodies. Okay, we're also told that. Its desire is for you, the evil desires of the flesh, but you should master it. And Paul goes into greater detail about the exact process that's involved there. In Romans 7:17-22, he says, and now it is no longer I that work it, but the sin dwelling in me. Okay, so Paul's saying, I'm not doing these things. It's not my desire to do these things. The desire, the evil desire, comes from the flesh, the body that I'm in. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good. For to wish is present with me, but to work the good I do not find. Because he wants to do the good. Just he finds himself sinning. And he'll go on to explain this problem. For the good that I wish to do, I do not do. But the evil I do not wish to do, this I practice. And if I do that which I do not wish, it is no longer I who work it, but the sin dwelling in me. That's what is bringing this about. Remember, its desire will be for you or toward you, but you shall master it. So Paul is going to talk about how to master it in a little bit. He says, I find therefore this law, that when I wish to do the good, that the evil is present within me. For I delight in the Torah of Elohim according to the inward man. Okay? The inward man is our spirit. We've got our flesh and we've got our own personal spirit. And the spirit actually delights in the Torah of Elohim, and it wants to do it. It's just the desire comes from the flesh, from the sin dwelling in the flesh. Its desire shall be toward you, but you shall master it. How do we master it? Well, good thing that he explains here is that in the inward man, he delights after the Torah of Elohim. So we should start there. He will go on in Romans 8, but first let's look at Galatians 5:16-17, because he explains it here as well. He says, and I say, walk in the spirit, the inward man, and you shall not accomplish the lust of the flesh. It tells us in Ezekiel 36, 26 to 27 that Yehovah will put his spirit within us and cause us to walk in his statutes and his judgments. And he brings his spirit, or our spirit, he brings into alignment with his spirit. He puts his spirit inside of us, then brings our spirit into alignment. So if we walk in the spirit, we shall not accomplish the lust of the flesh, because the flesh and the spirit are different. Sin dwells in the flesh, and its desire is toward you, but you should master it. How do you master it? With your spirit, which is greater than your flesh. I remember before I ever knew Elohim, there was a period of my life where I was addicted to heroin. I didn't know him at the time, but what I said within myself, the way that I mastered my desire to take heroin, was I said, there is nothing in this world that can make me do something if I decide not to. And the me that I was talking about was the spirit that was inside of me. It's amazing that this came to my mind, and this was the procedure by which I stopped sinning well before I ever knew Elohim. I said there is nothing, there's no pain, there's no vomiting, and praise Yehovah, I wasn't that far gone with the heroin that I had. The vomiting, merely, it was uncomfortable, I couldn't sleep. I had other withdrawals. It was just very, very uncomfortable, the experience. But I said, there's nothing, none of that can make me sin if I choose not to. And in my head at the time, as I say, I was talking of my spirit being greater than my body. That's the concept that I had in my mind. Amazing. For the flesh lusts against the spirit. The flesh and the spirit are at odds with each other. And the spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do what you desire to do. In the inward man, you delight in the Torah of Elohim. You see it as a beautiful thing. Flesh, its desire is toward you. The sin that dwells in your flesh, its desire is toward you, but you shall master it. How do you master it? By walking in the spirit, according to the mind of the spirit, and not according to the mind of the flesh, which Paul goes on to explain in greater detail in Romans 8. There is then now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah Yeshua, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the spirit. So he's saying, look, in my flesh dwells no good thing. I find myself doing that which I don't want to do, but that's because he's walking in the flesh. He says there's no condemnation if people stop walking in the flesh, but they start walking in the spirit. He says, for the Torah of the Spirit of the life in Messiah Yeshua has set me free from the Torah of sin and death. Now, this is something that people get very, very confused, very, very mixed up here. Okay? They think that these are two different things, the law of sin and death and the law of the Spirit of life, but they're not. They're actually the same Torah. If you obey the Torah, you walk in the Spirit, that brings life and peace. If you disobey the Torah, it becomes to you the Torah of sin and death. Paul calls it in 2 Corinthians 3. He calls it the ministration of death, in fact. The means by which you are killed is when the law is written on stone as opposed to a heart of flesh. If it's written on a heart of stone and you don't do it and you're stubborn towards it, then that brings death. And then to you it is the Torah of sin and death. That's what it becomes about to you. However, if you walk in the Spirit and you obey the Torah, it becomes the Spirit of the life in Messiah Yeshua. That's what brings life, it brings abundance to us. So it's the same Torah. These two things are not different. It's just your response to it. It's either walking in the flesh or walking in the Spirit. For the Torah being powerless in that it was weak through the flesh. Okay? This word for here means because. So this statement, he's then saying because the Torah being powerless in that it was weak through the flesh. Elohim, having his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and concerning sin, condemned sin in the flesh. So that we no longer walk in the flesh, we walk in the Spirit. So that, the reason that he did this was so that the righteousness of the Torah should be completed in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. If we walk according to the Spirit, we fulfill the righteousness of Torah. If we walk according to the flesh, we have sinful desires and we do not master them according to the inward man, according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh. If you're living according to the flesh, set your matters on things of the flesh. That's not matters of the Torah, as it will explain. Okay, this is sin having its desire towards us and us not mastering it. That's walking according to the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit, the matters of the Spirit, that's what's important to them. The Spirit inspired the word of Elohim. Okay, Ephesians 6. Okay, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim. So if we walk according to the Spirit, we're walking according to his word. We'll see this as we continue. He says, for the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. Exactly what he was talking about in the second verse there. For the Torah of the Spirit of life, the Torah of sin and death. Here, the mind of the flesh is death. The mind of the Spirit is life and peace. Because the mind of the flesh, if you're walking in the flesh, it's enmity towards Elohim, and it does not subject itself to the Torah of Elohim. Walking in the flesh, you're going to do the desires of sin, and you're not going to be subject to the Torah of Elohim. Neither indeed is it able. Why? Why is it not able? Because the sinful desires are in the flesh. So what dwells in the flesh is no good, as Paul says. Okay, he says that you must walk in the Spirit, which desires to do the Torah. So you walk in the Spirit, you are submitted or subjected to the Torah of Elohim, and you're not at enmity against Elohim. And verse 8 tells us that those who walk in the flesh are unable to please Elohim. So if you're following sinful desires and you've not submitted them to Yehovah, and you've not fully started to walk in the Spirit because you thought perhaps that walking in the Spirit was something that it's not, what you need to do is you need to master the desires of the sin that's in you with the inward man, with the Spirit, and walk after the Spirit rather than after the flesh. 1 John 2:16 says, because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, okay, the sinful desires, the sin dwelling in the flesh, the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but it is of the world. Instead, we walk according to the Spirit, which seeks the things of the Father and wants to do them. You've got a choice. Sin is in the flesh. Its desire is toward you, but you shall master it. How do you master it? You walk according to the Spirit, which acknowledges the righteousness of the Torah of Elohim. And as Paul says, so that we might fulfill the righteousness of the Torah of those who do not walk according to the flesh, but those who walk according to the Spirit. Hebrews 8, 1-10 says, now the summary of what we are saying. Okay, this is an important moment in the book of Hebrews. If you want a summary of what the book of Hebrews is saying, it's this. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the greatness in the heavens. So what we've been talking about is how our flesh is defiled and how the sacrifices in the temple were designed to cleanse the flesh. All is cleansed by blood. The flesh is cleansed by blood. The conscience is cleansed by blood as well, by Yeshua's blood. But the blood of bulls and goats and the sacrifices in the temple weren't for that. They were to cleanse the flesh, which is defiled through sin when you obey the desires of sin rather than mastering it. If you do that, and everyone does that throughout their lives, you need your flesh cleansed because it is defiled before Yehovah. We don't have a temple, okay? The better position to be in, though, is to be with the heavenly tabernacle, which is always going to be there, where our guilt is removed from before Yehovah, than to not have the earthly tabernacle. Okay, it's better to have the heavenly tabernacle than just the earthly tabernacle. If you're going to take one or the other of them away, you take away the earthly tabernacle because that only cleanses your flesh. It's important for us to have our flesh cleansed because of this defilement that we've been reading about. However, we're not in a position where we've got a temple. Okay, there are not priests, sons of Aaron, who are the ones who are required to carry out the sacrifices. So we can't do them. And it's a shame because we would be all the better to not have defiled flesh before Yehovah. But praise Yehovah that he has left us with Yeshua so that our conscience at least is clean before him. So the summary of what we're saying is this. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of greatness in the heavens. This is what all of the book of Hebrews has been setting up to this point, that Yeshua is our high priest in heaven, and who serves in the set-apart place and of the true tent which Yehovah set up and not man. Okay, the one in the heavens. Yehovah set that up, not man. Man set up the earthly tabernacle. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. So it was necessary for this one to have somewhat to offer. So it was necessary for Yeshua to have something to offer because he was a high priest. And priests offer sacrifices. The offering that Yeshua brought was himself. And he washed us through his blood. Okay? However, if Yeshua was on the earth, he wouldn't be a priest. Okay, he wouldn't be a priest in the earthly tabernacle, sorry. He is only a priest in the heavenly tabernacle. Exactly what verse 4 says. He says, for indeed, if he were on earth, he would not be a priest. Of course he wouldn't. The whole of the book of Hebrews up to this point has been establishing how Yeshua can be a priest. He had to be called after the order of Melchizedek, or after the likeness of Melchizedek might be a better translation. In other words, he had to be called in the same way that Melchizedek was called, according to an oath, because he couldn't be called to be a priest after the order of Aaron, as it says in Hebrews 7:11. He couldn't be called after the order of Aaron, in other words, in the same way that Aaron was called, because to be called after the order of Aaron, you had to be of that particular lineage. So if he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the Torah. This is the Levites, the specific lineage of the Levites, of Kehath, the Kohathites, we might know them as. There was a particular lineage within the Kohathites who were the sons of Aaron, and only they could be priests. So Yeshua, if he was on the earth, he could not be a priest. Notice that it says, since there are priests. That is in the present tense. It doesn't say since there were priests. The book of Hebrews isn't saying all of this has been done away with now. It's just establishing a difference between the heavenly tabernacle where our conscience is cleansed and the earthly tabernacle where our flesh is cleansed. Who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly. This is exactly what was stated in the book of Exodus. It's been this way all along. This hasn't superseded the one on the earth. This was here right before the one on the earth, or it's been here since Yehovah created the heavens and the earth. Who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly, as Moshe was warned when he was about to make the tent. For he said, see that you make according to all the pattern shown you on the mountain. See that you make according to all of that pattern. Okay? So right from the beginning, the heavenly tabernacle has been there. Yeshua serving in the heavenly tabernacle does not supersede the priests on the earth. If he was on the earth, he wouldn't be a priest because he wouldn't qualify. He had to be called after the order of Melchizedek, in the same way as Melchizedek, rather than after the order of Aaron. But now he has attained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator over a better covenant, which was constituted on better promises. This is something that people get mixed up. He's got a more excellent service. Of course he has. He's serving in the heavenly tabernacle, which is what the earthly tabernacle is patterned after. It's not saying that he's done away with the earthly tabernacle. His service is just better. He's the mediator of a better covenant, established on better promises. Now we're going to see why exactly, as we read through Hebrews 8, why it's a better covenant and why the better promises. But just so that you've got it in your minds as we go into this, it's a better covenant because the people broke the first covenant and Yehovah disregarded them. And the better promises because those people made promises that they didn't keep. They promised to obey the Torah and they just went about their way. However, the new covenant is a covenant where people can come in repentance for sin. And these people actually want to follow Yehovah. His law is in their minds and in their hearts so that they may do it. For if that first covenant had been faultless, okay, again, this word for, it means because, it's explaining this statement here. If that first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. So that first covenant wasn't faultless. Okay, but if it had been, no place would have been sought for a second covenant. Yeshua would still have had to die so that our guilt could be cleansed, so that our conscience could be cleansed before him. However, there would be no need for a new covenant to be established. Verse 8 says, for finding fault with them. Okay, so this is the fault that is discussed here. This is the fault with the covenant. For finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Yehovah, when I shall make with the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah a new covenant. So in Jeremiah 31, where this statement statement is made, it was because Yehovah had found fault with the people. They did not walk in his covenant. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim. Why? Why is it not according to that first covenant? Because they did not continue in my covenant and I disregarded them. So Yehovah never broke his covenant with these people. They broke it. And when they broke it, he disregarded them. Okay? So Messiah comes along and then he initiates a new covenant in his blood, as opposed to the blood of bulls and goats. Not that he is taking away sacrifices in the temple, just that the covenant that he initiates is based on his blood being shed. And it's an entirely new covenant. It's not renewed, as some people will teach. If it was renewed, then that initial offering of the blood of bulls and goats, by which the first covenant was sanctified, that would be enough. However, since it's a new covenant, his blood had to be shed to establish the covenant. Because they did not continue in my covenant and I disregarded them. This is why it is a better covenant, and that's why it's constituted on better promises, because the people coming into this promise, this covenant by their promises, aren't going to be ones who did not continue in the covenant and be disregarded. That's why the promises are better. Because this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yehovah, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. These are the better promises. Okay, their laws will be in their mind, writing them on their hearts. I will be their God. Finally, I will be their God. They won't just pay lip service to me and say that I'm their God. And they shall actually be my people. These are the better promises. Hebrews 10, 1-4 says, for the Torah, having a shadow of the good matters to come, not being the image itself of the matters, was never able to perfect those who draw near with the same sacrifices they offer continually year by year. Notice again, it's in the present tense, the sacrifices which they offer year by year. The sacrifices haven't been done away with. It's just a misunderstanding of the text. The Torah having a shadow of the good matters to come. What were the good matters to come? What's been discussed? It is Yeshua cleansing our conscience. The things that were done in the earthly tabernacle was a shadow of the heavenly tabernacle. Okay? That doesn't mean the earthly's done away. It just means that they're a shadow of them. And the things done there didn't perfect the conscience. They just cleansed the flesh. Okay? Not that that's unimportant, just that what was to come was better. The cleansing of your conscience is better than the cleansing of your flesh. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, because those who served, once cleansed, would have no more consciousness of sins? So, if those offerings weren't for the cleansing of the flesh, but they were for the cleansing of the conscience, like Yeshua's sacrifice, they would have come to an end once done, because there would be no more consciousness of sins. That's what Yeshua's sacrifice achieved. And that is why his sacrifice is once and for all, because there's no more consciousness of sins because of his sacrifice. However, having your flesh cleansed is a completely different matter. But in those offerings is a reminder of sins year by year. None of this is written in the past tense as if to say, all of this has been done away with now. No, it's not saying that at all, the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews is a fantastic work that explains the heavenly tabernacle after which the earthly tabernacle was patterned. For it is impossible for blood of bulls and goats to take away sins from the conscience, which is the context here. They could take away sins, the defilement of the flesh when people had sinned, but they couldn't take away the consciousness of sins, because if that was their purpose, they would have ceased to have been offered, just like Yeshua's sacrifice. Acts 21, 17-24 is something that we've looked at maybe a month and a half ago. People will say, well, if we are to still do sacrifices if there was a temple, why are they not doing sacrifices in the New Testament? Because there was a temple then. It's a decent point. Acts 21:17 says, and when we had arrived in Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. So they arrive in Jerusalem and they're received by the brothers in Jerusalem. And on the following day, Shaul went in with us to Yaakov, and all the elders came. So Paul went into James and all of the elders. And having greeted them, he was relating one by one what Elohim had done among the Gentiles through his service. So he greets them, he tells them what's been going on amongst the Gentiles. And when they heard it, they praised the master, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands of Yehudim there are who have believed, and all are ardent for the truth." Look, you see how many Jews there are who have believed for the Torah, which is the truth, but anyway. And they're all ardent for the Torah. They've been informed about you, that you teach all the Yehudim who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moshe, saying not to circumcise the children or walk according to the practices. It's funny, isn't it, that exactly the same thing that people are accusing Paul of today, they were accusing Paul of back then, misunderstanding Paul. What then is it? They shall certainly hear that you have come. They're all going to hear. All these Jews who are ardent for the Torah, but they're believers in Messiah, they're going to hear that you've come, and they're going to want some kind of reckoning. So do this, we say to you. Who said it to him? Was it Paul that came up with this idea? Perhaps Paul's doctrine is in error? No, it was James and the Jerusalem council. So do this, what we say to you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Now, it says something about this vow. It says, take them and be cleansed with them and pay their expenses so that they shave their heads. And all shall know that what they have been informed about you is not so, but you yourself walk orderly, keeping the Torah. So, this vow stopped them from shaving their heads. And when they were cleansed, they would shave their heads. This is a Nazirite vow. You'll find the procedure in Numbers 6. But to cut it short for you, the procedure of being cleansed from this vow is only done through offerings and sacrifice in the temple. So what they're saying when he comes to Jerusalem is, go to the temple, present offerings and sacrifices, and they'll know then that you walk according to the Torah and keep it. Verse 22 of Leviticus 7 is where we're up to. And says, and Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Yisrael, saying, do not eat any fat of bull or sheep or goat. So people go very kind of over the top with this. And they say, oh, we must cut all of the fat off all of the meat that we eat. Simply because they misunderstand this command. They don't read the scriptures as a whole and read this in the context of the rest of Leviticus 7. We go back to the beginning of Leviticus 7, it says, then he brings from it all its fat. So all of its fat is brought after the animal has been slaughtered here. What they weren't doing is going through and cutting all of the fat off all of the bits of meat. This was the butchering of the animal. He says all of its fat, and then it lists all of its fat. It says the fat tail, the fat that covers the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage on the liver, which is like a little fatty nodule on the liver, which he removes with the kidneys. You see, what we've lost in our modern society is what it is to butcher animals and what is actually involved in butchering animals. When you butcher an animal, you will find on its inside, around its internal organs, is fat. And that is called in Scripture the fat of the animal. It's not talking about the fat that's on the meat. That's a part of the meat. That is classified as the meat. Do you think when they killed the Passover lamb, they were going through and taking off all of the fat of its meat? Of course not. We've got the fat that is pictured here. And this fat is commonly referred to as suet, okay? Or maybe tallow. This sort of fat is the internal fat of the animal, the fat of the animal. Okay, this is what you're not to eat. This is what is set apart to Yehovah. So you have to be careful. When I went to buy some beef stock the other day, it had listed on the ingredients beef fat. You think, well, this is just the fat of meat because we do not butcher animals. But it's not. It's this sort of fat, the suet fat, the really kind of, it's of a different quality, this fat. In pork, which obviously we're not concerned with, but in pork it is the lard, okay, or the suet. In beef, it's the special sort of fat. What we don't need to do is go through our meat and cut off every sliver of fat in it. Good luck trying to get all of the fat out of a well-marbled piece of meat. You could nuke it when you were cooking it, but really, that's not what it's saying. It's saying eat the meat, don't eat the fat. It's apparent when you butcher it. This is the meat. The meat has got some of what we would call fat on, but it's not what the scriptures define as the fat of the animal, which is to be burned before Yahuwah. It gives us the instructions very precisely what this is, and it is different to fat that's in meat. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe. This should make more sense now. Yahuwah spoke to Moshe saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, do not eat any fat of bull or sheep or goat, the internal fat, the fat of the animal. And the fat of a dead body and the fat of what is torn is used for any purpose, but you do not eat it at all." So an animal that's died of itself, or an animal that is torn by beasts, is not appropriate to give to Yahuwah. The Torah tells us we cannot offer those things to Yahuwah. So the fat of those things, what you can do is you can use it for another purpose, and there are many different purposes for fat, but you cannot eat of it. Even when it's not appropriate to offer it to Yahuwah, you still cannot eat the fat of that animal. And again, it's the fat around the entrails. "And whoever eats the fat of the beast, of which men bring as an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, even the soul who eats it shall be cut off from his people." So this holy, set-apart fat, no eating of that. "And do not eat any blood in any of your dwellings of bird or of beast." Okay? Another thing that people being overly cautious with the Torah, well, not overly cautious, you can't be overly cautious with the Torah, you should always err on the side of caution, but through wanting to follow the Torah, but perhaps lacking a bit of understanding on the matter, they will not eat blood that is within the meat of the animal. "Any soul who eats blood, even that soul shall be cut off from his people." What we need to recognize is that there are two sorts of blood. Now, there might actually be more sorts of blood, but there are two that we are being concerned with when we look at meat. There is hemoglobin. Okay, hemoglobin is what flows through the animal's veins. Okay, and that is what is not to be eaten. The blood that is in meat is called myoglobin, and it's different from the blood that's in the veins. Myoglobin, we can see in these three examples, is different in different types of meat. This one doesn't have very much myoglobin in. The pink is just kind of in the center of this one. It's mostly white meat. This is chicken. This has got a little bit more myoglobin in. And this is beef. Okay, and this is red meat from the cow. And it contains this. It contains a lot of myoglobin. Well, myoglobin is not a problem, because just like the fat, which is a part of the meat, the blood, which is a part of the meat, is not what is being prohibited here. The blood that is a part of the meat is different from the blood that you're not supposed to eat. And anyone butchering an animal would know this. We've just missed this from our modern lifestyles, where all of the butchering of animals is done away from us, which is also why people have such a repulsion to the offerings that are made. Really, the instructions for the offerings being made are just butchering instructions. And it says you will provide meat for the priests through this. Today, we go to a supermarket and we pick up some meat, and it's all been butchered for us, and it's all a very sanitary process in our minds. If we were a lot closer to the butchering of animals, then the instructions given in Torah about how they were to butcher the animal wouldn't appear so bloody and gruesome. Exodus 12:9 tells us something interesting. It says, this is talking about the Passover lamb again. It said, "Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water." If it was a problem for them to eat it raw because of the myoglobin that was in the meat, this instruction would not be necessary. It would be part of the "you shall not eat blood" instruction. We're allowed to boil it in water usually, but not with the Passover lamb. We're allowed to eat something raw if we want, but not with the Passover lamb. The blood that is being spoken of is different. So there, we're at the end of the third part. You're about to skip back to JP during the day, giving the fourth part. Shalom. Okay, so in this part, I'm going to explain what tithing is. And then at the end, we're going to read through the 7 days that lead up to what Charlie's talking about next week in Torah portion Shmini. Shmini means eighth, and it's the 8th day of the consecration of the priests. So we'll do the first 7 days in this. So Leviticus chapter 7, verse 28 says, "And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, he who brings his peace offering to Yehovah brings his offering to Yehovah, the sacrifice of his peace offering. This word is karav. It means to draw near. The word for offering is korban, from the word karav. It's a thing that you draw near with. That's what it's all about. With his own hands he brings the offerings made by fire to Yehovah. He brings the fat with the breast to be waved as an offering before Yehovah. So the priests are usually bringing the offerings here. Say this to the children of Israel, when they bring an offering, they're to bring it themselves with their own hands. They're to bring the offerings. Then the priest shall burn the fat on the altar, and the breast shall be Aharon's and his sons. Fat, Yehovah's. The breast goes to Aharon and his sons. And the right thigh you give to the priest as a contribution from your peace offerings. Okay, so you divide it up. This bit goes directly to Yehovah. Fire, this bit is Yehovah's, but I'm going to give this bit to this priest and this bit to this priest. He among the sons of Aharon who brings the blood of the peace offering and the fat, the right thigh, is his portion. So whoever brings the blood, they get the right thigh and they eat that. For the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the contribution I have taken from the children of Israel, from their peace offerings, and I give them to Aharon the priest and to his sons a law forever from the children of Israel. So what he's saying is, this is mine. This offering has been given to me. However, I have given it to these people. I mean, people would probably see it as, we take our offerings and the priests receive our offerings. That's not how Yehovah says it works. The Yehovah says you bring it to him, and he gives it to the priests. This is the anointed portion for Aharon, and the anointed portion for his sons from the offerings made by fire to Yehovah, on the day when Moshe presented them to serve as priests to Yehovah, which Yehovah commanded to be given to them by the children of Israel, on the day that he anointed them, a law forever throughout their generations. You'll notice that the things that we bring to Yehovah, he's very particular about what he wants to be done with them. In Leviticus 27 verse 30, we see this as corresponds to the tithe, or as pertains to the tithe. All the tithe of the land, of the seed of the land, or of the fruit of the tree belongs to Yehovah. It is set apart to Yehovah. So our tithe, the 10%, is set apart to Yehovah. We cannot touch any of it. It says, in fact, that if we touch any of the 10%, we are stealing from Yehovah because it's his. People have in their heads, oh, we give the tithe to the Levites. That's whose the tithe is. But that's not quite the case. The case is we give it to Yehovah. We set it apart. It's his portion. 10% of what he gives us, we set that apart. That's his. He does tell us what he wants done with it, though. Numbers 18 verse 21 says, and see, I have given the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the service in which they're serving, the service in the tent of meeting. Now what we're going to be looking at is who the Levites are today. The Levites were to serve the people. They were the teachers in Israel. They were the ones who were put in all of the villages. There would be a Levite in order to explain the Torah to the people. Okay, serving for the service in the tent of meeting. Today, what's the tent of meeting that we have? It's the body, isn't it? Okay, so the service of the people doing the same thing in the body. But we'll see as we go on anyway. But the tithe to the children of Israel, which they present as a contribution to Yehovah, I have given to the Levites as an inheritance. This is why he gave them this portion of his offering. Because when they came into the land, they didn't have any stuff of their own. Okay, they had no means by which to support themselves. They did not go and labor in the field. Their work was done for the Lord. So their income comes from the people for whom they are serving in the tent of meeting. Genesis 14 verse 20 is worth bearing in mind, because people will say, they'll say, oh, the tithe, yeah, the tithe, that was fruit and vegetables, wasn't it? What, do you want me to give you a salad? Okay, that's not what the tithe was. The tithe was a 10% of everything that you've got, okay? Or 10% of your increase, the proper words. What Yehovah increases you with, you take 10% of it and you set apart that to Yehovah. And we see this when Abraham comes to Melchizedek. Melchizedek said, and blessed be the Most High El, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tenth of all the spoil of the battle, of that which Yehovah had increased him with. He gave him a tenth of everything. We see Yaakov says, and Yaakov made a vow saying, seeing Elohim is with me and has kept me in this way that I'm going and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on. When I have returned to my father's house in peace and Yehovah has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house. And of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you. This has always been the pattern. It's always been 10% of all. What did those people have in the day? Well, they were an agrarian society. They took in what the field provided, and they gave a tenth of that. 2 Chronicles 17, 7-9 explains the roles of the Levites, because people think, well, the Levites, they only did service in the tabernacle, didn't they? They offered the sacrifices. And it's not right. The Levites did do the service in the tabernacle. They carried the tabernacle around. However, the people who did the sacrifices were the priests. That's what I was talking about before. The priests were Levites, but not all the Levites were priests. The Levites had a different job in Israel. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he sent his leaders, Ben-Chil and Obadiah and Zechariah and Nathanael and Michayahu to teach in the cities of Yehudah. And with them he sent Levites, Shemayahu and Nethanyahu and Zebediahu and Ashael and Shemiramoth and Jehonathan and Adoniyahu and Toviyahu and Tovadoniah, the Levites. And with them Elishama and Yehoram, the priests. And they taught in Judah. And with them was the book of the Torah of Yehovah. And they went around into all the cities of Judah and taught the people. This was their role. And we saw what the role of the teachers was before. The teachers are to teach the Torah to people. They're to give understanding of the Torah to people. It was exactly the same back then. Nothing has changed. 2 Chronicles 35, 1-3 says, and Yoshiyahu performed a Passover to Yehovah in Yerushalayim. And they sacrificed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And he set the priests in their duties and strengthened them for the service of the house of Yehovah. And said to the Levites, who were teaching all Yisrael, who were set apart to Yehovah, put the set-apart ark in the house which Shlomo, son of David, sovereign of Yisrael, built. So the Levites did that service. They carried around the stuff. They carried around the ark and things like that. But also, they're teaching in Israel. Yehovah says that he will scatter the Levites amongst Israel because that's where they're needed. They're needed in all of the towns of Israel to teach the Torah so that the people understand the Torah. Nehemiah 8, 4-9 says, and Ezra the scribe stood on a platform of wood which they had made for the purpose. So this is when they come back from Babylon. We talked about them going to Babylon before. This is them coming back. When they came back, Ezra stands on a platform of wood. Beside him, on his right, stood Mattithiah and Shema and Aniah and Uriah and Hilkiah and Maaseiah. And on his left stood Pedaiah and Mishael and Malchiah and Hashum and Heshbaddanah, Zechariah, Meshulam. Okay, all of them, they were all there. And Ezra opened the book in the sight of the people, for he was above all the people. When he opened it, all the people stood up. So he's there, stood on his platform of wood, and he opens up the book before them. And Ezra blessed Yehovah, the great Elohim. Then all the people answered, Amen, Amen, while lifting up their heads. And they bowed their heads and worshipped Yehovah with faces to the ground. And Yeshua, which is actually how Yeshua's name is pronounced, it's Yeshua. We really do need to get into the habit of saying that. Yeshua and Bani and Shereviah and Yamin and Ahuv and Shabbathai and Hodiah and Maaseiah, Kelita, Azariah, Yozavad, Hanan, Peliah, and the Levites, what did they do? They caused the people to understand the Torah. What are the teachers to do? They're to cause the people to understand the Torah. This is the system that was set up then. It's the same system now, while the people were in the place. And they read in the book of the Torah of Elohim, explaining its meaning, and caused them to understand the meaning. What do we do here? We read the Torah portion, and we cause people to understand the reading of the Torah portion. This is the way that it's supposed to be. And Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and the Levites who taught the people, said to all the people, "This day is set apart to Yehovah your Elohim. Do not mourn or weep." For all the people wept when they heard the words of the Torah. They heard the law being taught. They realized what they'd been missing out on when they were living in Babylon, and they all mourned and they wept. 2 Chronicles 30:22 says, "And Chizkiyahu spoke to the heart of all the Levites that taught good understanding concerning Yehovah." All the Levites who taught good understanding concerning Yehovah, that's what they did. And the sovereign of Ashur commanded, saying, "Send one of the priests whom you exiled from there to go there. Let him go and dwell there, and let him teach the judgment of Elohim, of the Elohim of the land." And one of the priests whom they had exiled from Shomeron came and dwelt in Bethel and taught them how to fear Yehovah. That's what the Levites were supposed to do. That's what the teachers today are supposed to do. Just everyone's gone scattered. They've gone off all over the place. They're teaching themselves the Torah. No, they're supposed to come to the teachers, the ones who have been put in the body for that purpose. Deuteronomy 33 is when Moshe blesses the tribe of Levi. And this is what he says about the tribe of Levi. It says, "And of Levi, he said, your Tumim and your Urim belong to your kind one, who you tried at Massah, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah, who said of his father and mother, I have not seen them, and he did not acknowledge his brothers or his own children." Okay, this is when Moshe came down from the mountain, found them all doing the golden calf, and the tribe of Levi killed them all indiscriminately. Okay, it didn't matter who it was. "For they have cherished your word and watched over your covenant. They teach your judgments to Yaakov and your Torah to Israel." This is who the Levites were. We've totally lost this understanding of who the Levites were. We think that they just offered sacrifices in the temple. They didn't. The Levites were the teachers scattered amongst Israel to give them good understanding and to explain the Torah, what it means to them by the Ruach. Nowadays, we're spread out all over the world, aren't we? We're in the exile. Israel has been scattered all over the world. Nowadays, we've got teachers among all of Israel in all the places where they've been scattered who bring understanding of the Torah to people. This is who the tithe is paid to now. And we'll see that, in fact, Paul actually says this in his writings. The problem is no one understands the New Testament in the context of the Old Testament, so they completely lose all of the meaning. Nehemiah 10:34-37 says, "And we cast lots among the priests and the Levites and the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our Elohim according to our fathers' houses at the appointed times year by year to burn on the altar of Yehovah our Elohim as it is written in the Torah, and to bring the first fruits of our soil and the first fruits of all fruit of the trees year by year to the house of Yehovah. Also to bring the firstborn of our sons and our livestock, as it is written in the Torah, and the firstling of the herds and our flocks, to the house of our Elohim, to the priests attending in the house of our Elohim." So as we saw, the priests are different. The priests are the ones who received all of these offerings, the first fruits and all of that sort of thing. And that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our contributions, and the fruit from all kinds of trees, of new wine and of oil, to the priests, to the storerooms of the house of Elohim. And the tithes of our land to the Levites. The Levites should receive the tithes in our rural towns. So the priests, they were receiving all these offerings. The Levites, who were spread about in all of the rural towns to teach the Torah to them, they're the ones who receive the tithes. In 1 Corinthians 9:13-14, Paul says, "Do you not know that those serving the set-apart place eat from the set-apart place, and those attending the altar have their share of the offerings of the altar?" Okay, the priests, they get their offerings from the offerings of the altar. That's how they live when they have nothing to subsist on. So also, Yehovah instituted that those announcing the good news should live from the good news. When did Yehovah institute this? The tithe. Those announcing the good news which it says the gospel was preached even to them, to the Israelites. Those announcing it should live from the good news. He's talking about the offerings and he's talking about the tithes. We've just completely lost the context of what is being said here. So he's saying, those people who are among you who are teaching the Torah to you, the tithe is to go to them now because they don't have any other way of subsisting. Ephesians 4:11-14 says, and he himself gave some as apostles and some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers, for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of service, to a building up of the body of Messiah. Their service in the tabernacle, their service to a building up of the body of Messiah, the tabernacle. Until we all come to the unity of the belief and knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. He's given all of these people, those who go forth with the word, those who proclaim the good news. And Yehovah instituted in the tithe that those who preach this, who proclaim it and send it forth, should live from the tithe. So that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching. It's funny, isn't it, that the two things that people want to escape from are having any teachers who tell them what the doctrine is and giving the tithe. In the Christian church, they bang on about the tithe all the time, but the law of God has been done away with, even though the tithes are part of the law. In the Torah movement, they've done exactly the opposite. They bang on about the Torah all the time, and we must keep the law of God, we must keep the law of God. Oh, apart from the tithe, that was just for the Levites. They don't understand what it actually was. Deuteronomy 17:18-13 gives us some information. Bear in mind what we were talking about before, about the fact that you are to follow the teachers, you're to obey the teachers in their doctrine. Of the Levites, it says, when any matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, or between stroke and stroke, matters of strife within your gates, then you shall rise and go up to the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses, and shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge who is in those days, and shall inquire, and they shall declare to you the word of judgment. Okay? It's too difficult for me. The Levites declare what the word is. And you shall do according to the word which they declare you, from that place which Yehovah chooses, and you shall guard to do according to all that they instruct you. Do according to the Torah in which they teach you, according to the judgment which they say to you. You do not turn to the right or to the left from the word that they declare to you. There's none of this, oh, that's not how I interpret it. Okay? That's not how it's meant to be done. You go to these people, they have been inspired by the Ruach to teach the word. You go to them, you find out what the word says from them, and then you do it. You don't turn to the right or to the left from it. So this is what it says about that. The man who acts arrogantly so as not to listen to the priest who stands to serve there before Yehovah your Elohim, or to the judge, that man shall die, and you shall purge the evil from Yisrael. This is serious stuff, okay? And let all the people hear and fear, and no longer do arrogantly. We had a bunch of arrogant people here not so long ago who decided that our interpretation of the scriptures was not correct. And we were very patient with them, and we explained the scriptures to them. But they wanted to do their own thing. They had their own interpretation of doctrine, and now they have been purged from the congregation. In Deuteronomy 14:22, there's something that we need to understand with this tithe. Because when people are teaching about the tithe, they'll teach, okay, so there's the tithe that you give to the Levites, and then there's the tithe that you set apart for the festival when you go to the festival in Jerusalem, and then there's the tithe that you give every 3 years to the poor, so let's call that 3.3%. So it's a 23.3%, that's how much of your earnings you're supposed to give. But this also is a nonsense. Deuteronomy 14:22 says, you shall tithe without fail all the yield of your grain that the field brings forth, year by year, all of your increase. And you shall eat before Yehovah your Elohim in the place where he chooses to make his name dwell, the tithe of your grain and your new wine and your oil and of the firstlings of your herds and your sheep, so that you learn to fear Yehovah your Elohim always. Talking about the tithe, this is what goes to the Levites. But when the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to bring the tithe, or when the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when Jerusalem's too far away, when Yehovah your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver. You shall turn it into money and give money. When you can't give the tithe in animals, you give it in money. And shall take the silver in your hand and go to the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses. And you shall use the silver for whatever your soul desires, for cattle or sheep or wine or strong drink, for whatever your soul desires. And you shall eat there before Yehovah your Elohim, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. So what people want to do is they want to make this a separate tithe, because, oh no, we don't want to take away from the tithe that people are supposed to be giving to the Levites. Oh no, we'll make this a separate tithe that they're supposed to do it with. But notice what it says. It says, take your tithe, and the word for tithe is ma'aseh, which means tenth. So take your tenth. If you can't take the animals to Jerusalem, take it in silver, and then spend of that silver, of that 10%, for whatever your soul desires. So you go to the feast, and you spend your tithe money on going to the feast and enjoying yourself. This is something that is never taught in the modern churches, obviously, or in the Torah movement among those who teach the tithe. So you take the silver and you do with it whatever your soul desires. So does that mean, oh, that's good, don't have to tithe to the Levites. I'll just take all of my tithe and I'll spend it on what I'd like. That's quite a nice little loophole there in the law, isn't it? I think that I'll do that. Do not forsake the Levite who is within your gates, for he has no part or inheritance with you. Don't forget what the tithe is for. Don't forsake the Levite in doing that. Yeah, go and have a good time. That's great. Everyone needs to go to the feast. But don't have a wicked thought in your head saying, oh, actually, I'm going to spend my tithe on whatever my soul desires instead of the Levites. Don't forsake the Levites. Deuteronomy 14, 28 to 29. This is the other bit that people get mixed up. At the end of 3 years, you bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year and store it up within your gates. So what were they usually to do? They were to take it to Jerusalem. At the end of the 3rd year, what they were to do is they were to take out the tithe and store it within their gates, the gates of the city in which they lived. And the Levite, because he has no portion with you, and the sojourner and the fatherless and the widow who are within your gates shall come and eat and be satisfied, so that Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in the work of your hand which you do. So this is what people call the poor tithe. Notice what it says though. Store it up within your gates. Still give it to the Levites, because how else are they going to live for that year? But also spend it on the poor that year. Deuteronomy 26, 12 to 15 says, when you have completed tithing all the tithe of your increase, people miss the fact that it's constantly referred to as the tithe of their increase and just go, oh no, it's just animals and food. The tithe of your increase in the 3rd year, which is the year of tithing, and have given it to the Levite, to the stranger, to the fatherless, to the widow, and they have eaten within your gates and have been satisfied. So you've done all the tithing, you've done it all according to the Torah. Then you shall say before Yehovah your Elohim, I have put away the set apart portion from my house, and also have given it to the Levite and to the stranger and to the fatherless and the widow, according to your command, which you have commanded me. I have not transgressed your commands, nor have I forgotten. I have not eaten any of it when in mourning, nor have I removed any of it for any unclean use, nor given any of it for the dead. So it didn't matter what it was for, no matter how great an excuse I thought I had for spending the tithe. I've not done that. I've tithed exactly according to what you've said. I have obeyed, shamad, the voice of Yehovah my Elohim. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. So we're told, when you've done this, go out and you can declare this before Yehovah. Remember Malachi 3 where it says, test me in this, do this, bring it into the storehouse, test me that I don't open the windows of heaven and abundantly bless you. Well, you can come before Yehovah at this point and say that. You can say, look from your set-apart dwelling place from the heavens and bless your people, Israel, and the land which you have given us as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. You can then ask for that blessing because you've tithed to Yehovah. You've set apart his 10% and done with it exactly what he wanted done with it and not used it for your own purposes. So verse 7 of Leviticus 7 says, this is the Torah of the burnt offering, of the grain offering, of the sin offering, and of the guilt offering, and of the ordinations, and of the peace offering. The 5 offerings that Charlie went through last week. This is how the priest is to give them. Which Yehovah commanded Moshe on Mount Sinai on the day which he commanded the children of Israel to bring their offerings to Yehovah in the wilderness of Sinai. And that's what we've just seen in the Torah portion. Verse 8 then goes on to describe the lead up into Charlie's Torah portion. So I'm just going to read this. I'm not going to give any commentary of it. It says, "And Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, Take Aaron and his sons with him, and the garments, and the anointing oil, and the bull of the sin offering, and the 2 rams, and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble all the congregation at the door of the tent of meeting, the door of the tabernacle. And Moshe did as Yehovah commanded him, and the congregation was assembled at the door of the tabernacle. And Moshe said to the congregation, This is the word Yehovah commanded to be done. So Moshe brought Aaron and his sons, and he washed them with water. He put the long shirt on him, and girded him with the girdle, and dressed him in a robe, and put the shoulder garment on him, and girded him with the embroidered band of the shoulder garment, and with it tied the shoulder garment on him. All the things that we've looked at the construction of over the past few weeks. And put the breastplate on him, and put the Urim and Tumim in the breastplate. And put the turban on his head, and on the turban on its front he put the golden plate, the set-apart sign of dedication as Yehovah had commanded Moshe, the plate that said holiness to Yehovah. And Moshe took the anointing oil and anointed the dwelling place and all that was in it and set them apart. And he sprinkled some of it on the altar 7 times and anointed the altar and all its utensils and the basin and its base to set them apart. And he poured some of the anointing oil on Aaron's head and anointed him to set him apart. And Moshe brought the sons of Aaron and put long shirts on them and girded them with girdles and put turbans on them as Yehovah commanded Moshe. All the other priests were brought. And he brought the bull for the sin offering. And Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the head of the bull for the sin offering, all of them. I think there was only about 5 of them at the time. And it was sacrificed, and Moshe took the blood and put some of the horns of the altar all around with his finger and cleansed the altar. Here we've got the cleaning with blood again. And he poured the blood at the base of the altar and set it apart to make atonement to Yehovah. He made it holy at that point. Hebrews 9:13-25 shows us how this pertains to us. It says, For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the defiled set apart for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Messiah through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim? And because of this he is mediator of a new covenant, so that death having taken place for the redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, those who are called might receive the promise of everlasting inheritance. Okay, this was why the new covenant came, wasn't it? Because they had all broken the old covenant. For where a covenant is, it is necessary for the death of the covenant offering to be established. Okay, so whatever the offering was to establish the covenant, the death of that thing has to be in place before that covenant is in place. This is how we know it's a new covenant and not a renewed covenant, because the old covenant was established with the blood of bulls and goats. The new covenant, the covenant offering in that case, was Yeshua. For a covenant over those dead is firm, since it is never valid while the covenant offering is living. So before Yeshua died, the new covenant wasn't in force. After he died, it was. Therefore, not even the first covenant was instituted without blood. For when, according to Torah, every command had been spoken by Moshe to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people. This is Exodus 24 when he does this, saying, This is the blood of the covenant which Elohim commanded you. So when Moses established this covenant, he said, This is the blood of the covenant. Just like Yeshua, when he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, gave it to them, saying, This is my body given, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, the cup also after supper, saying, This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. Okay? In the same way, he sprinkled with blood both the tent and all the vessels of the service. That's what we've just read about now. And according to the Torah, almost all is cleansed with blood, and without shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. It was necessary then that the copies of the heavenly ones should be cleansed with these. The copies of the heavenly ones, the earthly ones, should be cleansed with the blood of bulls and goats. But the heavenly ones themselves with better sacrifices than these, with the blood of Yeshua. For Messiah has not entered into a set-apart place made by hand, figures of the true, but into the heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of our Elohim on our behalf. Not that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters into the set-apart place year by year, with blood, not his own. When the high priest had to enter into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, he entered in once and for all. So Hebrews 8 should make much better sense in the context of the things that we've looked at now. But now he has obtained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, constituted on better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. For finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Yehovah, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehudah a new covenant. Not a renewed covenant. That's something that you'll hear in the Torah movement as well. It's not renewed, it's new. It's entirely new. It's based on Yeshua's blood, not on the blood of bulls and goats. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers, a new covenant. No, he hasn't renewed it, because otherwise he wouldn't say not according to that covenant. In the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they did not continue in my covenant, I disregarded them. He didn't break his covenant, they broke his covenant, so he needed a new covenant. Leviticus 8:16 says, and he took all the fat that was on the entrails and the appendage on the liver and the 2 kidneys with their fat, and Moshe burned them on the altar. And the bull and its skin and its flesh and its dung he burned with fire outside the camp, as Yehovah had commanded Moshe. And he brought the ram and the burnt offering, and Aharon and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram. And it was sacrificed, and Moshe sprinkled the blood on the altar all around, cleansed with blood again. And he cut the ram into pieces, and Moshe burned the head and the pieces and the fat. And he washed the entrails and the legs in water, and Moshe burned the entire ram on the altar. It was a burnt offering for a sweet fragrance, and an offering made by fire to Yehovah, as Yehovah had commanded Moshe. And he brought the second ram, the ram of ordination, and Aharon and his sons laid their hands on the head of the ram. And it was sacrificed, and Moshe took some of its blood and put it on the tip of Aharon's right ear, and his thumb of his right hand, and the big toe of his right foot. All of that has tremendous significance, but I won't go into it now. And he brought near the sons of Aharon, and Moshe put some of the blood on the tips of their right ears, on the thumbs of their right hands, and on the big toes of their right feet. And Moshe sprinkled the blood on the altar all around, and took the fat and the fat tail and the fat that was on the entrails, an appendage of the liver, and the kidneys and their fat, and the right thigh. And from the basket of unleavened bread that was before Yehovah, he took 1 unleavened cake, and a cake of bread anointed with oil, and 1 thin cake, and put them on the fat and on the right thigh, and placed all these in the hands of Aharon and in the hands of his sons, and waved them as a wave offering before Yehovah. Moshe took them from their hands and burned them on the altar. On the burnt offering, they were ordinations for a sweet fragrance. It was an offering of fire to Yehovah. So this is all of the priests come in. This is their ordination of service. This is the big ceremony where Moshe is doing it all and ordaining them into the priesthood. And Moshe took the breast and waved it, a wave offering before Yehovah. It was Moshe's portion of the ram of ordination, as Yehovah commanded Moshe. All the things that we've just seen commanded. And Moshe took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood that was on the altar, and he sprinkled that on Aaron, on his garments and on his sons, and on the garments of his sons with him. And he set apart Aharon, his garments, and his sons, and the garments of his sons with him. And Moshe said to Aharon and his sons, cook the flesh at the door of the tent of meeting, and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of ordinations, as I have commanded, saying Aharon and his sons are to eat it. Then burn the rest of the flesh and bread with fire. And do not go outside the door of the tent of meeting for 7 days. So they were to be in the tent of meeting for 7 days, until the days of your ordination are completed. For he fills your hands for 7 days. You've got enough stuff for 7 days here. Okay, this is this ordination. He's filled your hands for 7 days. And as I say, these are the 7 days which lead up to the 8th day, which Charlie is going to talk about. Yehovah has commanded to do as he has done this day to make atonement for you. Stay at the door of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days, and you shall guard the duty of Yehovah and not die, for so I have been commanded. And Aharon and his sons did all the words that Yehovah had commanded by the hand of Moshe. All the things that we've seen in the past few Torah portions, they did them all. Shall we pray? Father, we thank you for revealing yourself through your word to us, so that we can so we can know you and draw near to you. I thank you that you keep blessing us in our obedience to you, and you keep showing us more of exactly who you are and exactly what you want. I pray for everyone here, Father, that you allow the words that have been sown today to be sown on good ground for them, that they would bear fruit, that they wouldn't be cast aside and be taken by the cares of the world. I thank you that you care for us and that you've put everything so precisely in your word for us to follow so that we can please you. I pray that we're pleasing to you. Thank you, Father. Amen.